as I said, today we have another artist interview, and if they will open up their webcam again, I can probably start bringing them in. Today we have a good friend of mine, a very talented producer. This right here is Silent Science, aka Nori, aka Lexi. Did I
Hi.
get it all? Did I get that all right?
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough. Well, okay. Why don't you introduce yourself then?
All right. Yes, I'm wearing a ramen noodle hoodie. Hi, I'm Silent Science. But in real life, I get called Alex because that's what I'm called. And yeah, I'm a music producer. I'm half Danish, half American, and I write neuro, IDM, interesting sort of textural stuff like that.
Oh, fun. So, I guess we can kind of get started because I'm realizing that you have you ever streamed on Twitch?
I've streamed once. I streamed with Rising Edge when I was over at his house in France, and I also streamed on my own at
Yes,
some point.
I remember that. But you've never really been like you've been in the Twitch music community, but I haven't really seen you do a lot of that stuff. So I think
Yeah, no.
what we can do is just kind of go through the basic run of things. I have a bunch of questions to kind of introduce people to
Sure.
you. So to start off, like, where are you from? Because you have a very Americanized English accent, but you're currently living in, I believe, the UK, right?
That's
But
right.
that
I
isn't
moved
where
to
you're
the UK.
from.
That's not where I'm from,
So,
no. So I was born in Denmark. First language I ever learned was Danish. So English is not my native language, but it is now. And so I've just moved around a whole lot just due to my dad's job. And I've essentially ended up here for music school. So now I'm going into a school called DBS Music, where a lot of cool producers that you will know come from, like Zenji, if you know him, and Zomboy, and people like that. They all came from DBS, which is
oh,
it's pretty cool.
that's interesting. I didn't realize that you had a pedigree. We already have a couple of questions if you want to grab those. Glorious Rainbow is asking, what is your hair care routine? Because they need
What
to
is my
know.
hair care routine? Let's see. Don't trim it for 6 years and then trim it once.
There you go. And question two, when are you getting a new chair?
Good question. When I'm not broke, but for now, you're gonna have to deal with the squeaks. I'm so sorry,
There we go.
but there you go. Yeah.
So, how did you get into music? Was it like a thing from when you were really young, or did you have like any family who played music?
Right. So my mom's grandfather was the pianist for one of the very first Dixieland jazz bands, and my dad was a professional pianist for a little while, but other than that, not really. The first thing that got me into music was Guitar Hero, because that is how everybody gets into music nowadays. But that led me to discovering metal, which is a really good segue into dubstep of all things.
Hmm.
So of course that led to Skrillex, and then my bro step phase, and then that moved on to drum and bass and the Monster Cat and all of that, and then eventually led to that's the sort of community that we're in now, which is the whole like Mr. Bill um, community, where you've got people that all know each other. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I mean, and for people who are not in Mr. Bill's community, I think y'all should go check out his channel and go click on the link to his Discord because there's a lot of really talented people in there, and I've met a lot of friends who are there. I think you, Sila, and Primo, I've all
Yeah,
met
they're
because
all
of
from
that
there.
community. So it's a real great place to be, and like all the people there are just super fun, and I'm really grateful to have met people like you because you're a wonderful person, honestly. A little bit
Oh,
of
stop it.
buttering up, I know, before we get into the hard stuff.
Uh-huh.
But so you talked a little bit about the music that you listened to growing up. I'm assuming you listened to a lot of jazz when you
Yeah.
were a kid. You got into metal, you got into dubstep. Were there any other genres that you were drawn to, or was it kind of like a very linear path?
Right. So, my mom was actually a candy raver. So she would go to raves, and be all buttered up and dressed up with all the neon lights and everything, which is great to see when you're a 40-year-old white woman. But so that led me into things like acid and like that sort of late 90s electronic scene. So that's what really introduced me into the sort of left field sort of stuff.
Mhm.
And that's actually what brought me into IDM. And of course, people who listen to things that are sort of off the grid like IDM and things like Neuro and Halftime and things that aren't necessarily in the mainstream currently, at least, um, tend to find other weird left field genres as well. So that's also through I think it was, who would it have been? Like people like Copycat and people like that. That's what really got me into the whole Halftime thing, which is now, I hate to say it, it's what gets the views. I mean, and I still like writing it, but it's what gets the views. So
It's not as not as much of a passion project as it was in the early days.
exactly, yeah.
I get that. I get that. Um, well, what kind of influences? I mean, you've already listed a couple, but like, what would you say are your biggest musical influences, or
Good
who?
question. Yeah,
Yeah.
good question. I like to say that I listen to a few artists, but I'm not that diehard of a fan. Um, uh, I so actually I got this idea from you. Thanks very much for the idea of making reference playlists on Spotify. Thanks to that, that's actually really broadened my horizons because I'll end up finding one or two songs from an artist I would have absolutely never discovered, that I just thoroughly enjoy. And of course, they all fit into a general theme that I enjoy, which ends up being a lot of the time interesting chord progressions or textural sort of elements or things like that.
Hmm.
But because of making reference playlists for which, if anybody doesn't know, that's just playlists on Spotify based off of different genres like garage or
Hmm.
IDM or things like that, that are a good source of inspiration if you need it for anything specific. But that has especially led me to just finding weird artists that I would have never found, um, that I would have never found before. But if I had to like pin down specific people, it would probably end up being like literally the people in the community that I'm in, which ends up being like Vorso, Clockvice,
Hmm.
Copycat, Roger Wilco. The recent remix on uh, Bill and Aus A5's newest album,
Hmm.
of Schlappy the VIP.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and just yeah, it ends up being a lot of the people in the community and the people that I'm surrounded with as well. So everybody in the in Mr. Bill's new label, Bill Eagle
Little
Beats,
beats,
I'm a
yeah,
huge fan of them. So people like Box Cutter,
yeah. Blanket
who
Dragon.
do, yeah, exactly, Blanket Dragon, Primo, and just people I'm surrounded with, because we're always sharing work in progresses and we're always sharing music like that, and that's how I end up finding most of my music nowadays. Anyway,
Like really, you feed off of your friends in a sense,
yeah, exactly.
which is really cool. I mean, I like that idea. I think it's, it's something that I find is it's a hallmark of people who are in a really good creative space. Because you don't have to go too far to find the inspiration, and at the same time you're not elevating people up onto a pedestal, because everyone who you named, I'm pretty sure you've written music with.
Exactly. That's right. And that is also really good because, of course, everybody has outside influences. Everybody lives their own life and experiences music whether or not they want to, and experiences inspiration whether or not they want to. So everybody you're friends with sort of brings in their own taste based on what how they're currently living at the moment, which is super
Oh
nice, especially
yeah,
if you've got such a close knit community.
definitely. I mean, that's a good point, but like, kind of that reminds me of like a question that I have written down here. Like, you talked about, everyone has their own different experiences with music, and even outside of music that influences them. Like, what would you say are the biggest non-musical influences on your work?
Um, it's it's within the same realm, so it's kind of a cheap answer. I'll try and find a better one, but design, like art, architecture, design, anything that sort of falls in that category of media, because that is, it's still obviously a really creative space, and it is a place where you can find a lot of variation and a lot of like tailored things to what you enjoy. So like just a weird thing that I'm really into nowadays is typefaces and typography,
Okay.
and things like that, where it's just a weird niche that you can really delve into, because there are people that spend their lives on these things, and of course it is a bit more open ended than something like business or
Yeah,
something like, yeah. So it is more open to interpretation than something that's very set in stone in that sense. So
definitely. Well, it's funny because Theo just asked a question that I was going to ask. Well, since you're big into typography right now, what do you think of the new font layout for Twitch?
has it changed on the mobile version? Because right now I'm on the mobile
Oh, I
version.
don't think it's changed on mobile yet, but
Oh
if
shit! Do I have to
you,
open this up now?
oh yeah, I
Let's
mean
see.
it's definitely a new. I'll give it that. It's definitely new and not something we had before.
Ooh, it's dark.
Yeah, I mean, I actually like how the new dark theme is more of like a jet black kind of color rather than like the very very dark, almost like navy blue it was at first. It's a bit easier on the eyes, at least for me. And
You hate it. It's fine. We understand. Same.
well, I guess kind of on that subject, like, are there like any particular like fonts or any particular kind of calligraphy, like I'm trying to think of like the best way to phrase it. Like,
Typefaces,
yeah,
things like that.
typefaces. Yeah, like anything that you're drawn to. Like, what's your favorite typeface right now?
So currently, so actually, one of the first things that actually got me into this. So this has been like a thing that I've been into for all of like 2 weeks. So it's not very long, but the thing that actually got me into it was the Ableton typeface, which is Futura, something like that.
Okay.
And it's a just the simplicity of it is super nice, which is why I'm drawn to another typeface called Comforta, something like that, with two A's at the end. And well, here I'll type that in chat so people. There you go.
Comforta.
Yeah, something like that. And it's just there. And of course, actually, I don't know if you follow Division Recordings or so Noise's record label, but Former, who is both a music artist and like a visual artist, just released a music video where he's got his own logo, which is just a typeface. It's not. He doesn't have like an icon or anything like that, and that typeface is really cool. It's a nice futuristic calligraphy, sort of something or another, and
For
it's tough to
sure.
explain. But
It's something that he made himself.
yeah,
Oh, I dig it.
he's worked with Noisia on songs before. He's a super dope, like neuro, almost like if Woolg wrote more heavy neuro stuff, that
Okay.
would be him. But he's trained as a visual artist, I think. So he does all of the visual art for Division Recordings.
Okay.
And so he's just a super talented guy. But yeah.
I'm with that. Oh, Theo is asking who the person was again. What was her name?
Former, the literally just,
Like, as in from the past.
yes, literally just that.
Yeah. How's it
Yep,
going,
there you
Archie?
go.
Awesome. So shifting just a smidgen, back to you. So, if we compared the first Silent Science record, even if it wasn't under Silent Science,
Yeah, I was gonna
compare
say.
that to now, Um, are there similarities, at least in kind of focus or in theme, or was there like basically like big shifts in your sound as you were kind of finding your identity as an
So
artist?
it's actually funny you mentioned that. I took something like a 360 in the sense of I started out doing IDM, then I had a middle ground where I didn't do any like edity anything, and then now I'm back to it. So for anybody who doesn't know, Silent Science isn't my first alias. It's probably not going to be my last alias. I hate settling on names, um, but I released a I think it was like a triple length album of stuff that I'd been working on between 2014 and 2017, just because I just wanted to get it all out there because I hadn't released anything. And so I started out. Uh, so that was something um, like 10 remixes and like 20 originals or something like that.
Okay.
And it was a hodgepodge of everything I'd been writing because of course this is 2 years of music production. So it went from really shitty stuff to like less shitty stuff. But I think the first song on there was, so this would have been the first song I'd ever written. It was a house IDM song made from loops from Loopmaster.
Hey.
Um,
Okay.
and it went all the way up to the most recent, which was a remix of Bill's Meaningful Ambiance. So that gives you an idea of the time frame of that.
Oh, cool.
but
Okay.
um but it had everything in between. So I had like an IDM tune, I had my attempt at like chill drum and bass, I had lo-fi. There was everything on that. And then after that I released something like two lo-fi albums under that name, and then I completely scrapped it and moved on to Silent Science. So
Okay. So, I think that's interesting. Like, there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of exploration, um, but So what I'm inferring from that is that you don't consider there to be like a through line necessarily, like not something that's cohesive to kind of tie them all together as like still your music
no, I
necessarily.
think nowadays I'm starting to really build a sound, because I think I definitely, for the first 3 years, I was in that experimental phase where I was just literally trying to figure out who I was and what it is that I enjoyed writing and things like that. And I think now I'm sort of starting to settle in, and of course, it helps that I haven't changed Alias in a while.
Totally.
And building that fan base and seeing what people are receptive to and what people aren't receptive to, and what people are like, give me more of that, and of course, I can provide that. Um, uh, but I think nowadays the the telltale sign of a track of mine is probably just interesting textures layered over jazz chords. Uh, but back then, it was so chaotic that anything, as long as it had shitty production, it was probably my song. But I think nowadays it's hopefully becoming a bit more refined, which will hopefully be seen in my next album coming out on Meth Lab Recordings. Check that out.
Hey,
So
shout out. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, Glorious Rainbow. Yeah. Can you save that question for later on? Because that's a really good question. If you want to answer that
what do
one
you
now,
think?
you can.
Yeah. So I think I've heard that song once before, and this would have been like 5 years ago. So correct me if I'm wrong. Is it like a house something tune? No, I
If it's
don't
Tiesto,
remember what that's.
if it's old Tiesto, it's probably trance.
That's what I was thinking. I'm gonna. Is it Adagio for strings?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Adagio for strings. Gonna go look it up.
yeah, I am. Because I have to hear this.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, so it's that is the kind of that, along with okay, so this would have been when I was 12, because keep in mind I'm not old. I hate to say it, I wish I
Unlike
was, but
me.
I'm not. So this would have been around the same time that I was listening to things like Crazy Frog, because I had that phase. And so that was that was actually the kind of music I listened to, because I had that was also the same time that I was really into Deadmau5. So I had like a whole like prog house trance phase and things like that. So I was actually a really big fan of house at that time, or just anything with a four on the floor beat, really.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I will admit I have like listened to almost no Tiesto, but I remember the Axel
Same.
F phase.
Yes,
Oh man.
yes, that's what got me into it.
So, kind of shifting back to the present, then, what is going on in kind of like the immediate future? Like you talked about the Meth Lab album. Do you have a timetable on that, or?
No, so I've been talking to Jeff, who owns Meth Lab, and right now it's sort of in the air because Meth Lab has just so much going on. Like they just consistently are releasing things. Same, it's like the same thing with Inspected Recordings, Inspected
Mhm.
Records. They're just releasing so much music that if you want to get in, you have to be part of the back catalog, and you just have to slot yourself in and hope that the time comes sometime soon. But
Okay.
but essentially, outside of that, I've got so I'm sitting on, I think, four completed albums right now. Um,
Damn.
uh, and one of those I'm going to be definitely releasing on my own, literally only for logistical's sake, because it is an album of covers, remixes and edits and things like that, and that's not really something you can monetize.
Yeah.
So that's just something I'm going to release on my own for free. And that should be coming up in the near future. Just if I stop doing remixes and if I stop adding to it. But outside of that, I've got a lo-fi album coming out on another alias. I've got I this is about the time that I told you about the no input mixing board whole thing.
Yeah.
Where I was working on a 3 hour no input mixing board thing that I wanted to print to vinyl for like 10 vinyls that only 10 people were going to get, and that was it. And I would never release it digitally or anything, just for the hell of it.
Sounds cool.
But of course that costs money.
It does,
So
yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious now. Like, what was the mixing board you're using, and could you explain what no input mixing board, like music, quote unquote, is
so
to
if
the
you give me a
people?
second, I can show you actually.
All right, so I will try and stall while Silent Science goes and gets their mixing board. Anyways, let me catch up on chat. Wobble Ice Official, Scent Proc, Funk Mod, Archer, Prop, Zen, Result. A bunch of people came in while we were starting this. Hope everyone is having a good day. So that looks like the mixing board. This looks like an even bigger mixing board.
All
What
right,
are those
so
big monstrosities?
okay, so number one is this guy. It's tough to see. It is a DJX 750 by Behringer, and it is intended to be a DJing mixer, which is why it only has those inputs on the back,
Okay.
which you should be like hooking up actual record players, which I've got one sitting like right next to me. But this is great because it has a really nice selection of built-in effects. And it's got some really nice, as long as you obviously have the cables for it, you can route it into itself, which is the crux of no input mixing boarding, which I should probably explain. Essentially, what that is taking a mixing board's inherent noise floor and inherent little glitches and things that you get when you plug things in and out and turn it on and things like that, and feeding it back into itself. And creating feedback loops which are controlled, so they don't blow your ears off. But then using EQs to tune, because you can actually, if you boost an EQ, if you've got like the mid-range EQs that you can select the frequency of, you can create chords using that. And using the effects and looping it back in on itself and just creating weird soundscapes. So this one's good for the effects. But this one, however, is good because it's a standard mixing board. So this one actually has like the controllable mid-range boost, and you can route it into, literally just you use patch cables and route it into itself using the inputs at the front. So you could just route and mix, and it turns into a modular system, which is super cool.
That's dope. Have you used it for anything like sound designy, or is it something that you're kind of let me try that sentence again. Something that you're keeping as a self-contained project?
So this isn't something I didn't buy either of these just to do the no input mixing board.
Of course, yeah.
This was the first mixer I actually ever had, but it's so what I first did was I recorded before I even discovered the no input mixing board thing. I tried out some feedback loop things and just recorded that, and then of course if you have a sound design session, you can chop it up and put in samplers and do granular synthesis and all that you will. But up until I discovered the people who actually release albums titled no input mixing board and actually do that for hours and hours and release compilations of things like that. This was just a standalone sound design device, and I used it for also recording live instruments because that's what it's intended for. But up until I don't remember when I told you about it, but I literally learned about it almost as soon as I told you about it. So that would have been a few months back, 6 months back,
Yeah,
something
a couple
like
months
that.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I started actually using it as a sound designer creation tool,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the method to it that I hit upon that was the most useful was feeding it a not an impulse response, but like something for it to respond to and hold on to to sort of create the whole feeling of the rest of the track. Because of course, depending on, even if you do the exact same thing every single time, no matter what you feed into it, it's going to have a different sound. So
Okay.
if you like ping a just like a simple sine wave that's like really short with a decay to it or something, that's going to make a completely different sound to something like giving it like a smooth chord or like a Rhodes or something like
Oh,
that.
for sure. Yeah,
Even if you
yeah.
mess it up completely, it's going to give you more interesting results.
Yeah, than just kind of like feeding it into itself, which is something I've had my own issues with. Let me see if I can unplug this and show off my own not as impressive little
No.
mixing board. My little, whoops, break the power cord. My little baby right here.
Right.
I've noticed that if I feed it into itself, I get pretty much one tone.
Yeah.
But if you feed it something different, it's definitely like a much more expansive color palette, for lack of a better word.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. The first time that I did the no input mixing board thing, it does only create one tone because it is the inherent nature of how long it takes the output to go back into itself creates that tone, and that is literally just, I don't know, like 200 hertz or something like that.
Oh,
I haven't
okay.
measured, but a problem with that is you can't tune it, which means that as much as I want to make some thick neuro basses with it, I can't because it's way too high.
Yeah, yeah.
But of course you can do that in post. But there's nothing like doing it live. So
Definitely. Real quick, for people who are maybe curious about this type of music, do you have any recommendations as far as like artists they could check out?
I do, and I actually have to look up his name because I'm terrible at remembering Japanese names.
Oh yeah, there's that person who I don't remember their name, but
I'll type it in chat. Yeah, Toshimaru Nakamura. I think he is the father of No Input Mixing Board. In fact, he has an album called No Input Mixing Board, and he's done something like 57 albums of just stuff like that.
That's so cool. I mean, I remember you showed me his work, and I was very inspired by that. He has like interviews and stuff. There's a lot of stuff from this dude.
Does he?
I feel like I've seen at least one, or at least it was something like talking about his process or something.
Right.
Which, if I remember correctly, that was actually where I got the idea for these interviews. was like
Right.
seeing a couple of those. So you are in some way kind of responsible for this whole thing happening.
Nice.
So it feels good that you're
Hell yeah.
here. But I feel like that's a good time to kind of start pivoting into the main section of this, where
Sure.
we're going to be listening to some of your tunes, exposing people who are unfamiliar to your music, and kind of just going over the whole process. So let's start with your released track, which
Yeah.
I'm going to post a link to in the chat right now. Everyone can go check that out and follow along. And you said you just wanted to listen along on the stream, right?
Yeah, I can just mute myself and
Okay.
listen along.
For sure. So I am going to play this tune in just a second. Sorry about that. And let's check it out. This is going to be Arnut by Silent Science and another friend of the stream, Primo.
Great title there.
Oh, yeah. forgot how like detailed that song was. Man, like just a musical journey from start to finish.
Yeah,
Like
it took a long time to write
it
that.
was so good. Honestly, I love that track so much. Honestly, I probably listened to it like 20 times when that album came out. That was one of my favorite tracks
Man.
of the time period. So, I guess to start, let's I guess start at the beginning. So
Sure.
how did this track get started? Did you first work on it, or did Primo?
So, actually, the first iteration, quote unquote, iteration of this started, I think something like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. This was when I
Okay.
first joined Discord and first joined Bill's server, because Morgan was one of the first people I ever met on there. And we started a collab, and it was god awful because neither of us were that good at that point. But we worked on that. It was like this drum and bass idea, which I think we may have taken one thing from that project file and put into this one. But honestly, that was almost entirely scrapped. But then so then I think a year and a half later, so late 2017, we started up this track. And when the idea of Beleaguered immigrants came around, then we started to we considered actually putting it on there because both of us wanted to be on there, of course. And as you know, as Morgan might have talked about in the interview, he is doing the behind the scenes sort of stuff
Hmm.
of illegal immigrants. So he already had an into it. So we decided to put it on there. And the first thing that actually came of this was the sort of Jersey bit at the beginning that
Yeah.
comes. It's the very first like quote unquote breakdown, but that was the very first thing that we ever made, and I had started on that.
Oh, for sure. How so? Like, I was gonna ask how, like, how far did you get in like the first couple of sessions, but clearly you got far and then you started over. So I
Yeah.
guess what was the process like? Kind of salvaging ideas or kind of rehashing an old idea into something new. Like, how did you decide to take this song and finish it? Essentially.
Yeah, so this was one of the first collabs that I've ever done that actually got done in a timely manner. Maybe just because we had an incentive of being on this cool new label and being on the first compilation, so it's like we might as well make it something good and make it snappy. So the after the Jersey drop, after I made that, then then I gave it over to Morgan. He worked on it a little bit and hashed out the start of a halftime drop in a different BPM. So the idea of a BPM change had been there since the beginning. We just
Hmm.
didn't decide to go into that sort of the tech acid sort of thing until later. That was followed the progression of the song and was one of the last sections that we did.
Hmm.
So that the BPM change had been there all along. Just that Neuro drop, we ended up keeping at the same tempo as the Jersey drop, which is like 150, 160, something like that.
Okay.
Or it could be, yeah. Anyway, um, so after essentially after scrapping the original one because this time about a year had passed since we had worked on it, and we were both like, I think we want to start over because we have fresh ideas. We've sort of found our sound now, and of course that makes for a better song if you both know what you want to get out of it.
Hmm.
It's a bit more difficult if you've got one person who really knows what they want and one person who is sort of still figuring out what they want. Because especially with collaborations with people who are really talented like Morgan, who really know what they're doing. It's super important to a listen to what the other person wants,
Hmm.
but also b know what you want, and in that sense, sort of pick your battles. Because if somebody really like, I specifically remember this would have been on like a live stream at the very start of when Bill was live streaming. I remember him saying, uh, picking your battles in collaborations means that you're going to have things in your songs that are going to sound god awful to you, but if it sounds good to the other person, you can't argue that. there are things that are going to sound good to the other person that aren't going to sound very good to you.
Mhm.
But of course, it's going to be the other way around as well. And so collaborations end up being a happy middle ground where you find a style that fits between the two of you. So.
Totally. I mean, I think that's actually a good topic to kind of hang on for a second, because,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this will either have gone through collaborations or have attempted collaborations or
Yeah.
are still seeking like their first big collab project. So can you talk a little bit about like your experience with collaboration and kind of, you know, both the peaks and valleys, so to speak, as far as the process, either with Primo or just kind of more generally?
Right. So I think I have something like upwards of 70 unfinished collaborations, which is how it is. Just like with your sketches folder, it just grows and grows, and you realize that you haven't finished a song in months.
Yeah.
But the very first collaboration I ever did, and this had okay, so it was for a project called the Netroom Project.
Mhm.
It was a compilation that three compilations were released, and then the project was shut down due to people not agreeing on what they wanted. And the very first compilation had uh, George, who is on Bill's server.
Mhm.
Um, I forgot. I don't know what he goes by. He shows up. George Sideris, I think is his last name.
Okay.
It had a Rising Edge on it, and this guy called League, who was a British mixing engineer who also wrote music, so that him, because he was also like one of the quote unquote moderators for that project.
Mhm.
He did the mastering for that. We got talking and we started on the first collab, which ended up being a neuro IDM trap song, which never got finished.
Totally.
But that was the very first person that that I ever worked with. And oh yeah, and Proc is talking about so as a collab server.
Oh, I remember the amalgam.
Amalgam. Yeah. So I'll get to that in a second. That comes later. There's a whole progression that I'm going to follow, but I can actually go to my collabs folder, and I'm sure I can find some people that I've worked with. Let's see. So I've got two collaborations here that I immediately see with Proc. Sent Proc in chat with one is one that we're actually working on for his newest EP, and then one was the very first one because Slug, Native Slug, and Proc sort of had like a small group in Discord, like the pretty much the first few months that we ever joined. So we would sit in voice chat for a while, and we started like a few channels in Bill's Discord that were like, I don't remember what they were, but they were like exclusive channels where we just meme to hell, and that was it. But that spawned a collaboration with Proc, which never got finished just because it fell to the way. Yeah, Chernobyl. That's what it was called. Just because it fell to the wayside. But we recently reignited another collaboration. But outside of that, let's see. I've worked. I worked on. Oh yeah, so Garden Sound. He was on that compilation. That's where I first talked to him. That's where I first learned of his 365, his Ableton 365 series.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I worked with Palm Mute. I don't know if you know Palm Mute. He's worked with Bill on a few things. He actually lived close to me when I lived in the Netherlands, so we met up for a few gigs and we worked on a few things. Nothing ever got released, but we did work on a few things. Outside of that, I've got like 4 different songs from me and Morgan that never got finished. I worked on a song with Scylla, which got finished, never got released. Don't know what happened, but that's okay.
Yeah, shout out Scylla.
Yeah, shout out to him. But outside of that, I don't know if you know a guy named Perfect.
I've seen the name.
Yeah,
but I don't think
he's been in Bill's server.
Yeah.
We worked on a few songs, and we're actually working on, I think, like three songs now. One of which was from before I changed my alias to Silent Science, and that one I'm actually rehashing right now and like bringing it up to a new standard, so that we can release it hopefully on Illegal Immigrants, because it is that sort of flavor.
Hmm.
But outside of that, I've looked for people who are interesting, and my philosophy is, what's the worst that can happen from asking? Like, they say no or they don't respond.
Yeah.
So you might as well ask. And who knows, you could get something really interesting from it. But that leads on to the Amalgam. Now that was a project that hit the shitter real quick, but I think we got out alive. So essentially, what that was a 12 person 15, no, it
Oh
would have been
no.
like closer to 15, 16 person collaboration that I had organized after seeing
The
the
Collab
collab,
Alliance.
yeah,
Oh no.
which just went awfully, and I thought I could do better, which I think I did okay. But of course, that was with a bunch of help from everybody else. Everybody was super, super helpful. I would not have been able to do it if it weren't for the massive amount of time and effort that everybody else put into it. But essentially, how we organized it was we had a pre-structured schedule where people would just work on a project file, or stems if we have to port it over to FL or Cubase or whatever.
Hmm.
And we actually got some pretty cool people into it. I don't know if I have the I no, I don't. We had a spreadsheet that said who was in it. So we had people. Mr. Bill was on it. Proc might have been on it. Mask Him. I don't know if you've seen him
Yeah, I
around.
have. Yeah.
He was on it. We had a few people on there, and we actually had a season two slated to come, with people like Funny Lab and Ilesha and people like that, but that didn't really go anywhere.
Mhm.
But we finished the song, and Bill has the live stream of him working on it up on his website if you ever want to go check that out. And it ended up being a 12-minute song, which I compressed down to 5-6 minutes.
Okay.
And it got to the mastering stage and just dropped off and never went anywhere after that. I still have the project file somewhere. We could still make it a thing, but yeah, it's a lost cause for now.
Well, I
But
mean,
that's okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that speaks to one of the big things about collaborations is it's like there's more collaborations started than finished.
Yeah,
Because I mean,
definitely.
obviously, this isn't a call out by any means, so please don't take it as such. But also, thank you, Retach, for that rate of 5. How's it going, buddy? Thank you so much.
Oh shit.
But like you and I have started a couple of collabs, and
Yeah.
generally, like for either you or I, like there's been kind of, just either because of time or because, of a different kind of focus. Because I think you and I have, similar goals but different aesthetics.
Yeah, I would agree.
And
But it is difficult to keep up that constant line of talking,
absolutely.
which is of course like one of the things that kills most collaborations. Which, have we had like started like two or three or
I
something
think
like that?
I think I think we started. Well, I sent you 2 project files. You started working on one of them, and then it kind of disappeared. And
Yeah,
then you sent me a bunch of sound design sounds, like
yeah,
samples, like a couple months ago, and I started on that, but like I couldn't really get it out of the ideation phase.
yeah. I've got what the thing that I've got under like my folder of like stuff that I'm working on currently is the 160 BPM trap,
Yeah,
which that is, I think, the one that's out of all the collabs closest to being finished. It's not finished, but it is out of all of them close to being finished.
yeah.
And that is definitely something I want to revisit. I think there were some really cool ideas. The only problem was that the the most recent project file got corrupted, so I have to go
Oh
through. I had to
no.
go through the backup, which thank God Ableton introduced that feature,
Yeah.
where it auto saves backups every 30 minutes, something like that, or whenever a large thing happens.
Mhm.
But that set me back a bit. But I am definitely intending to go back and start working on that again. So that isn't a lost cause by any sort of the stretch of the imagination.
Sure. But I mean, I think the reason why I mention that again is not to like kind of call you out or anything,
No,
but
no, no, no,
more
no, no.
to
Yeah.
like it speaks to kind of the issues that can arise and how like, we you can't really take it personally when a collab kind of falls by the wayside. And like, I want to apologize to you because I know that in the
Nah.
beginning I was taking it very personally when like we were working on the project and I sent it to you, and then there was a big period of silence, and like that's kind of just something that happens. Like
Yeah,
it's
but
not
I
something
also
that.
think that is on my side, of course, because that would have been early 2018, I
Mhm.
think. Maybe that's around that time. And that is, I have to say, that is my fault because that is the time I was going into therapy. And so to be brutally honest, my life was pretty much in the shitter at that point. Thank
Mhm.
God it's not anymore. But that is sort of my fault for not keeping up communication, because communication really is the heart of collaboration.
Yeah.
That's a good motto. Communication leads to collaboration, something like that. Somebody can turn
No.
that into a t-shirt. But yeah, I think keeping up communication with the person you're working on, even if it is just like checking in, like, or telling them where you are in the process, I think leads to a more fruitful finished collaboration, which Jengoza mentioned here. How do you decide when a collaboration is finished? Uh, that's that's a tough question. I think the easiest answer is when you've sent a collaboration to the other person or to the other people and you've gotten it back in the same state that you sent it, you're probably finished and you should probably move on to mastering. Which, of
Okay.
course, that could also be both of you have writer's block,
Mhm.
which isn't uncommon. But I think when it's gone back and forth a few times and neither of you have added anything that is, I wouldn't say core to the song, but core to the song, then you're probably getting close to that 95% finished mark.
That makes sense. I would agree with that definitely. Kind of just to stick on this a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm really curious. What you think about shared responsibility in like the production process. Like, do you care if it's a like 90% 10% or a 50-50 or even a 60-40? Like, does that matter? Or
So I think the way I've started to view it lately is that collaborations are a miniature duo. Like, as if you plan on writing a lot of music together, except you only write one song,
Mhm.
because that's what you're doing. You're taking two different people's styles and merging them into one. Like, the best example I can give is Electricado, which
Mhm.
is Mr. Bill, who at the start, so he comes from a psytrance background, but he is now doing more experimental IDM, harder.
Yeah.
Well, he's even on tour, the Fuck You I Make Banger tour,
Yeah.
which is the best tour name ever. But and then you've got Rhinosaurus, who is a pure psytrance person. That's all he does. But if you look at their most recent album, not EP, album,
Mhm.
Scribble, because their most recent EP was a more like house focused, minimal house, prog house
Yeah. Yeah.
focused thing. Their most recent album, Scribble, it has a lot of ebb and flow between their two styles. You've got two songs, which I think is called Steamy Big Room, and uh, I don't remember the name of the other song, but there's two definite songs which are full psytrance, like the whole 8 minute like prog psytrance. You've got the same kick the entire time, which, not hating on it, I enjoy it, but some people may view it as monotonous.
Mhm.
Which definitely is a Rhinosaurus style. And then you've got something on the complete other side of the spectrum where you've got glitchy edits and things like that. which is definitely more reminiscent of Mr. Bill. And so I think collaborations are just a miniaturized version of that. And if you intend to do more collaboration with a person rather than just one, because of course with one collaboration you can stumble through it and you can get a finished product. But if you really intend to sit down and find the perfect balance between the merge of one person's style and another's, which I think the best collaborations come out of people who have two completely different styles.
Mhm.
It ends up, you have to make more compromise, but it does end up with a more interesting product that you wouldn't have found otherwise. So I think that I think the the whole goal is to just talk to the person who you are, or communicate to the person who you are collaborating with, and so I think if you are up to that, and if you find somebody who, because there are people who aren't good at collaborating, like you need a specific set of skills, and you need to be able to be flexible, and you need to be receptive to what the other person thinks, even though you may think that is absolute like horseshit, and you have no
Definitely.
idea where they're coming from. And like, yeah, you have to be sort of flexible, and some people just don't have that, and that doesn't make them a particularly good collaborator. They may be a fabulous producer,
Mhm.
but it is two different skill sets. But if you find somebody, and if you guys really mesh, then you've got a song waiting to happen. So
Absolutely. Well, I mean, well. You mentioned like the skills needed to be a collaborator versus just kind of like a solo artist, and you
yeah.
talked a little bit about them, like good communication skills, obviously, which are helpful in pretty much like every aspect of
Exactly
life,
right.
honestly, and a receptiveness to. I guess not just different ideas, but like rejection of your
Yeah.
own ideas, because that's a big part of collaborating, is being like, I worked on a collab with Primo as well, and
Right.
on that tune, like I had a lot of different ideas about what I wanted to be in the song, and Primo was pretty ruthless, and I asked him to be, in terms of cutting ideas and changing ideas. And like the way I had the song that we worked on originally ending was pretty much just a straight up like Jersey club beat,
Right.
and I really liked it. I thought it was really cool. And Primo completely shit canned it. Like he kept like the Jersey idea in like the background atmosphere and like some of the synth
Right.
works, but like the whole drum groove changed for the outro.
Mhm.
And if I was more precious of my ideas, I think that wouldn't have worked out. So being able to not be too precious over the things that you put into a collaboration, I think is just as important as like the ideas that you put in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to some people, music is a wholly spiritual and emotional thing, and that's totally fine. And some of the best artists are the most emotional artists. But when it comes to collaboration, you sort of have to separate yourself from the music in that sense.
100%,
Which
yeah.
I have a funny story to share about that. So I'm currently in the process of working on a tune which could turn into an EP with Mr. Bill, and he is just absolutely ruthless, and that really got to me. I got to admit that actually really got to me. So there was one point where I'd sent him over the song as it was, like, as I'd finished, and I was really proud of it. And he essentially says, "This is really boring. This is not at all where I want to take it." And that fucking hurt, because and that's completely my fault, because
Nah, I don't think
he
so.
is, well, to an extent, because he is and always will be one of the biggest influences I've had, just because he got me into this community. And I'll always have a special place in my heart for him, not only as a producer but as a person. He's super chill guy.
Hmm.
But he, even knowing, and even coming from the perspective of this I am working with somebody who is inherently more experienced than me and therefore has, to an extent, better judgment. I don't want to say just because you work at music for 8 years or 10 years,
Mhm.
that means you're going to be an expert. With music instruments, you've got the 10,000 hour rule. You work on something for 10,000 hours, you're bound to be pretty good at it.
Yeah,
But I
absolutely.
think with something as expressive as composition, it's a bit more difficult. So I don't want to say just because you work on composition for 10 years, you're gonna be amazing.
Yeah.
But I think Bill definitely has that edge. And because of that, I definitely respect his opinion more than my own opinion. There are some things that I will be like, no, I want to keep this. This is definitely a cool idea that I've never done before.
Yeah.
I really want to keep this. And there were some things in that collaboration that I said, I want to keep this, and he was like, okay, fine. But there there is a fine line between taking it personally and looking at it as a do I like this because I think it's genuinely good, or do I like this because I'm emotionally attached to it?
Yeah.
So that's what I had to sort of separate during that. But yeah,
I get that. I mean, I think that's a good skill to develop. Honestly, is like n- learning how to identify like things that you are proud of and things that you are invested in.
yeah,
Like they can often be the same thing, but if you're careful, you can start to look at how you can separate them. And a lot of
exactly.
times, having someone who you look up to, someone who you respect, someone whose judgment you value, kind of making that decision for you almost
Yeah,
is something that I think it's tough, but it is almost in a way like a luxury, like it's a gift. Uh,
exactly. But it is tough, especially if you're not prepared.
oh,
But
absolutely,
if you
yeah,
if you are prepared, you can definitely take that in stride, and you can definitely improve yourself. And I think it it is just like going to school for music, in the sense that if you haven't ever gotten your things ever professionally critiqued,
yep,
there is a difference. If you get your things critiqued by somebody who knows what they're doing, like you, or somebody like Mr. Bill, somebody who has that background, versus just dropping your song in a Discord channel and seeing what people think.
oh
There
yeah,
is a definitive, like, um, step up in that sense of what they're going to be harsh about, and what they're going to say is a legitimately good idea, and what needs to be improved. And that is something that you have to be prepared for. But if you are prepared, you can build off of that much better than somebody in a Discord channel telling you what's crap about your mix.
yeah.
Which, I mean, no, which is great. People can definitely learn from that. I have learned thousands of things, and a bunch of tunes would not be where they are if it weren't for people on Discord, because that is an absolutely fabulous platform.
100%, yeah.
But nothing can really replace having a person who knows what they're doing tell that your stuff is crap.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
Like I'm with that, and I appreciate the compliment. You didn't have to, but I appreciate
it's
it.
true. It's true. You're definitely coming from the perspective of somebody who knows what they're doing, and you show that.
Oh, thank you. You're flattering. But let's move off of this because now I'm getting a little bit embarrassed. Let's move back
No.
towards Arnott then. So,
Okay. Yeah.
like, where did the progression in style of the song come from? Because you talked about like it started kind of Jersey and then it went to this halftime idea, but like the second half of the song is like straight four on the floor, just like trance house, fucking just a knocker.
Right. So as I mentioned before, the tempo change was there pretty much since the start.
Hmm.
The only question was what it was filled with. So originally that was another halftime section, more closer to like something Alan Moore would release,
Okay.
or first release, not his more orchestral stuff, but his like halftime banger stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
It was more, but that didn't really go anywhere because I think um, like Morgan and I have that similar eclectic style of we find it tough to write a song that has two of the same choruses.
Yep.
If you've ever listened to any of my music, you know that I find it very difficult to have two drops that are similar.
Yeah, very progressive.
Which it's it is a good thing and a bad thing. It has pros and cons, but I think that led to it being a four on the floor track because it went from something like 150 beats per minute down to 124, 125, which is a perfect house four on the floor thing. And at that time, you'll actually notice a lot of the songs that Morgan was writing at that time have that exact same acid bass in it because that was the style that he was on. And that's just the nature of music. You get onto styles and you get onto patterns that you like at the time, and then you just put that in your music, and that's totally fine. So
you rinse the shit out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So so that's what led to the sort of the chilled chords sort of thing was originally my doing, I think. And then he brought it into the more techno sort of acid direction, which I'd say the first half of the first half of the second half of the song. I don't know how I would explain it. The first half of the house section was more my doing. The second half was definitely more of his doing.
Okay.
I don't think I even touched the second half of the house section just because that was definitely his style, and I was totally okay letting that be his style because I think the first half was showing what we could really do together, and the second half was a sort of like showing how we would take one idea and do it differently.
I'm with that.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, I would never have thought of it that way, but I like thinking back on the song, I can definitely see what you're saying there. So it feels like the song is, like you were saying before, like a very much a 50-50 kind of process in terms of workload. Did you work together on the mix and master, or was that just your doing or just Primo's doing?
Right. So that is actually something I forgot that I actually wanted to touch on is that in collaborations, people will inherently be better than the other person at specific things. There will people who will have their strengths in sound design or drums or mixing or things like that. And I definitely think Morgan is much better than me at making motifs and making things that you can identify the song with. I'd say, so for the most part, I think I did most of the drums just because that's where my strengths lie, and not necessarily just drums, but like rhythms in general, because I grew up being a drummer, and that is where my background lies. I play other instruments, but at my heart, I am a percussionist, and I think most of the rhythms of the song were my doing, but I think the gluing together and actually turning it into a coherent song was definitely Morgan's doing. Because if you listen to it, I think it's four different ideas in one. You've got the intro section, which is chords, which sort of then leads into the Jersey section, which leads into the halftime section, which leads into the house section. So it is 3 or 4 different sections, which originally were just that. They literally in the project file had like 8 bars of space between them where we were just messing around with ideas, and then Morgan made it a thing.
See, I'm surprised, like, because I was expecting the song to be much more iterative, but it sounds like it really is. Like, you basically had, like, 3 or 4 different, like, mini song ideas, and you found a really inventive and really clever way of mashing them all together, pretty much due to the sheer fact that they were all in the same project file, it sounds like.
Exactly, and I think that does lend itself to the fact that doing sketches, even if they're like 4 bars or like 8 bars or something like that, and saving them in a place that you can easily access them, and then combining them later on, is such a good songwriting strategy, because you get that you get that mix of ideas, and you get that you would have never combined, say, like a house song with a Jersey song with a Neuro song, which is what Arnett ended up being.
Yeah.
But there, aside from the obvious things that sort of are a constant throughout the entire song, which I think is like the chord progression shows up in the last section, and there were a few instruments which were relatively coherent throughout the entire song.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, it is just three or four separate ideas. Just Morgan did a really good job at combining them. So yeah, props to him for that.
Oh yeah, shout out to Primo Tunes.
Yeah, shout out.
So where did the kind of the final glue come in? Like, or would you say that what we just talked about would exist as that? Like, was there something more, or?
No. So one of the last, actually the last project file after I sent it over to him, and he did the last work on it, and I just gave it the A-OK because I thought it was finished. I didn't think I could add anything else to it.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, what was finished was everything up until that house section. That house section was quite bare. I had my half done, but that outro section of the whole glitchiness and everything was not there.
Okay.
That wasn't there. So I think throughout every time, so I think it would have been, we would have passed it back and forth 4 times. So that's 8 separate project files. Throughout that, every time I got it back, he had glued it together a bit more. And of course, I would do everything I could to sort of make it a bit more coherent. If I was adding a new section, for example, I would try and take elements of that section and put it into the intro or Jersey section or whatever, just so it doesn't feel like a completely new thing. And I would do my best in that, but that is definitely something I struggle with and something I'm getting better at. But that is one of the strengths that Morgan has that he definitely put to use. So I'd say, after the 6th session, so 6 out of 8 sessions, we were pretty much on our way to having a finished song, and we were pretty much on our way to having the coherent structure that you can hear now in the finished tune. So that was really Morgan's doing, but that is where it ended up. And the last few sessions were just cleaning up until we couldn't pump it full of more textures.
I'm with that. So is there anything like that you want to maybe point out specifically in the project that you thought was really cool that we didn't touch on, or anything else that you want to mention about the track before we move on?
Yeah, let me know if you can hear this if I play this through the speakers.
Yes.
You can hear that. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, then that makes it easy on me. I can just play the sections. Okay. So the one idea that I'll play in just a second that I actually got the idea from a Mr. Bill project, because he has all his project files up on his website to download it, from his song called Straight Up Seminal Shit, which is a collaboration with him and the Fruit Bat, who he's done a few songs with. He did Trill Clinton as well. That project file, actually, the only thing, if you download that project file and open it up, it's just 4 stems. So they stemmed it out and forgot to take more versions of that. So all you are left with is the stems. So it's just drums, bass, synth, effects, and maybe the vocals are looped in with the effects as well, or maybe it's a separate stem. But it's just 4 stems edited. So of course this was back in his album Settling for Mediocrity. So this was the transition phase between his IDM and his CSS, which is the newest album that he's sort of working on. And so it was literally just 4 stems chopped up. And the general structure of it, if you were to listen to the stems without the edits, is there. But the little minutia and the little details are only things you can get once you have everything in one place and you can really finely edit it. And so that if you listen to the to the drop to the main halftime drop itself,
Mhm.
all the little edits that you hear and all the silence that you hear comes from those stem edits, because all of the original sounds that we had so many tails on them that you would have to freeze everything and chop it up from there. There was no way we could have done that
Okay.
in first pass. So let's just play a bit of a section of it and see.
Oh, like
So
that one right
especially
there. Yeah.
yeah, like and the stretches, the time stretching that you use, Ableton's warp modes, that wasn't there originally. That's all afterwards editing, just making use of interesting effects, making use of finely chopping up, and what Ableton can do when you stretch out something to its limit, or when you really compress it.
Oh, yeah.
So
Well, it's like, can you talk a little bit then about, how often you either start in MIDI and move to audio, or how often you start in audio, like kind of the mindset in the glitch community especially is like fuck MIDI.
yeah,
Like it's
no,
it's just
I that's I hate to jump on the bandwagon, but fuck MIDI.
yeah.
Um, that just because MIDI doesn't lend itself to that style of music, you have to work so much harder to get the same thing out of working with audio.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
there's just so many things that you can't do in MIDI that you can do in audio that are so beneficial to the IDM scene. And I hate calling it IDM because it's a stupid term, but
Oh, yeah.
brain dance and that whole genre, or set of genres.
Hmm.
And of course, MIDI lends itself to other genres, like orchestral. You would never be able to do that in audio. Um,
Yeah. Unless
yeah,
you're literally recording an orchestra.
yeah, exactly. No, and there's no way in hell I can do that anytime soon.
Yeah.
But just the workflow is so much easier in audio, and I think nowadays the only thing that I use MIDI for is like subs and chords, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Or no, that's not true. I'll start with MIDI during my sound design sessions, where essentially how my workflow goes is I'll take, if I really don't feel like songwriting one day, I'll I'll spend a while just making snares or something,
Mhm.
or bass drums, or something like that, and then compiling. And people tout this over and over again because it is such a good method, but just making yourself miniature sample packs and
Oh,
then
yeah.
pulling from that. And so when you are in a songwriting mood, then you can take the sounds that you made previously, and you don't have to make, you can chop them up, you can edit them to fit what you're making, but you don't have to make a complete new set of sounds. So I go from MIDI in sound design, which of course then I'll freeze and flatten and do all of that, and by the end of it my fuller will literally just, you'll have like freeze oh
Definitely.
01, something like that, and
Definitely.
it looks god awful, and then you have to organize it and everything. But then that will lead into just using mostly audio channels. I think the only thing that I use MIDI for outside of the chord and sub is like if I want to put something in a sampler,
Hmm.
especially if you want to get those like frequent like pitch bent like neuro things, then you kind of have to use samplers. It's because then it sounds sort of aliased if you use like complex warp mode
Yeah, the
and
pitch
things
bend
like
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
But that it yeah, I'd say sampler lends itself to neuro. But outside of that, audio is really what I mostly use.
Yeah, and I mean, even arguably, like even working in sampler by the name is working with audio because you're using
Yeah,
MIDI
that's
to
true.
directly manipulate an audio file. But like, what would you say are your main like MIDI tools, so to speak? Like, which synths and plugins do you find yourself reaching for the most?
So, about a year ago, I had won a remix competition, which got me Complete Ultimate 12. And if I hadn't, I would have never used any Native Instrument stuff. So, because of that, Contact is pretty much up there. If I want to do anything live sounding, it's the best thing I've found for live instruments.
Mm.
I mean, it's I don't use it a lot for the more synthy sounds, but it is definitely the thing that I use most for live sounds. But other than that, I'm just going to scroll through through my plugins. What jumps out at me? Lounge Lizard I use a lot for my Rhodes, because I use Rhodes a lot in a lot of my songs. Zebra 2.
Yeah.
Still waiting for Zebra 3. Actually, just I was watching the interview you did with Primo Morgan,
Hmm.
and he mentioned that he loved the Yuhi stuff, and I do too. They're absolutely great plugin developers, and I think anything from them is worth getting if you have the money.
Oh yeah.
Their Ubic bundle is just absolutely
Yeah, I
fabulous.
just picked that up.
Um, you did?
I
Okay.
just did.
Have you?
I'm late on the train.
Nice. What have you used it all or not yet?
I've used a little bit of Ubic G, but
Mhm.
it's still very daunting for me because it's
Yeah.
you get stuck with using the products that you're comfortable with, and even when you buy new ones, it's like I want to use it, but it's like I'm just not it's
You
not
don't know
in the
where to
thought
start.
process kind of
Yeah.
thing. But I definitely want to start using more of it because like Ubic G, Ubic is it F for the frequency or Ubic S?
Uh, it's S and F is the flanger, I think.
F is yeah. So I've been messing with a lot of Ubic G and a lot of Ubic S.
Yeah.
So I think those have been fun. Do you have any
Yeah.
preferences for as far as the Ubic
I'm
line?
partial to Ubic G just because it's
Mhm.
the easiest to get. You just flip through the presets, record yourself flipping through, and you've got a sound design session all ready to chopped up to
Absolutely.
be chopped up. But I think the reverb is pretty good.
Mhm.
It's Ubic A, I think Ubic Ambiance or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That one's pretty good. I haven't used their delay very much. I haven't used their phaser, but yeah, I think generally they just produce very high quality plugins, and I think they're all worth getting if you have the cash. But other than that,
Are you a
let's
Serum
see.
user?
Yeah, I'm a Serum user.
There we go.
I hate to say it. I love Serum. Nothing will ever replace it. But I have lately been getting into FM8 instead.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Going
mostly
back.
because, yeah, mostly because my school is a Native Instruments user, and they don't have Serum. So when I'm there and I want to do sound design, I'm sort of left with Massive, FM8, or the stock Logic stuff because they're
Mhm.
Logic users. And I'm familiar with Massive. I know my way around FM8. I don't know anything about Logic synths, so I'm not even ready to go there yet. So
Yeah.
if I want to do sound design, I end up going with FM8 just because FM8 has to be my favorite form of synthesis aside from maybe like subtractive.
Yeah, FMA's fun. Like it's still like I've been doing a lot of stuff kind of going back cuz like as you know I've been doing a lot of stuff with like Faceplant
Yeah. Mhm.
and I love Faceplant. Like it is literally like it's replaced Serum for me. It's replaced like most other plugins that I use for sound design, but like there's something about the matrix in FM8 that
Yeah.
changes the way that I think about everything that I'm doing. And I've been kind of moving back and forth to see like how much of that I can actually translate
Exactly.
into phase plan. And FMH is it's really useful in that way, but still like it's not as aggressive in its FM as like Serum or as Phase Plant,
No. Yeah.
but it has such a nice tone, such a nice timbre to it. Once
Yeah.
you get into some of the like the cross modulation stuff and a lot of self
Yeah.
modulation stuff, that like it's fun. Like it's just a
Exactly.
fun synth.
And it is one of those synths that you can't really replace because to my knowledge there isn't anything else on the market that offers eight like channels that you can route into itself as oscillators and create as complex sounds as FM8 does. I think um what I've been doing if I really want to go into FM if I want to use something less CPU intensive, I'll just stick with Operator because Operator is great.
yeah.
It's and I use that for everything. I use it to sketch out sounds. It's because it's and actually I've been getting into Ableton's analog as well. It's so simple, it's so stupid, and I love it to death. Because it's just god awful and it doesn't do anything well, and it limits you.
That's a good point.
And it's which limitation is the art of creation. And because if you have those limitations, it really forces you to think outside the box rather than having option paralysis. Which I think if I know what sound I want to go for, I'll go for FM8 or I'll go for Serum because I'm confident in those synths and I know how to get there. But if I don't know what I'm looking for, I'll fumble around and not get anywhere for 30 minutes if I'm using something as complex as those. But something more simple like Operator, you're stuck with 4 oscillators and a filter and an LFO. And they throw it at you and say, "What can you do with this?"
Yeah,
some pretty complex things.
Oh yeah.
But you FM8 in that sense feels more rewarding because you can get a lot more interesting sounds for a lot less. Which is great if you don't know what you're looking for. If you just want to come up with something interesting for a tune, that's how you do it. But yeah, but I don't honestly. I stick with the same few synths. I don't use a lot of different synths. I think I'm more of an effects person than I am a synth person.
Okay. Do you use a lot of third-party effects, or do you focus more on like stock plugins?
So I like to be able to get everything I can out of the stock plugins because I end up using a lot of effects. Like I have, if I think about it, I have a lot of effects chains that end up being very long, but it doesn't seem that way because I end up freezing and flattening my sound so often. But of course, your CPU just dies if you've got so many third-party things, especially if they aren't optimized. And I'm running off a MacBook Air, so it's not like I'm going to get much CPU anyway. But I think if I can get it out of Ableton stock stuff, I'll try and get it out of Ableton stock stuff. And even if I think I can't, I'll do my best, but there is just some things that Ableton doesn't offer that you have to go third party for. Let's see if I can give you an example.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Like if you want, like lately I've been using FabFilter's EQ if I want to do really precise things, but if I just want to cut the low end, I don't really care about sub phasing. I'm going to cut the low end anyway. It's not going to make much of a difference unless I'm putting an EQ on my sub. So I just use EQ8 for that. But if I want to be really detailed, then I'll do that. But I think Valhalla's stuff, like they produce a bunch of reverbs. Their stuff is just fabulous, absolutely incredible. They're the only reverb I use nowadays, besides Ableton's. Like they've got Plate, Room, Shimmer, and the vintage reverb,
which everyone uses. Yeah,
and those are I'd say like Room and the vintage reverb are the ones I really like. I've been moving towards the vintage reverb more just because I like that analog warmth, and I know herder analog warmth, but there's something about it.
Yeah, well, it's like Room, and I just have Room and Shimmer. I don't have vintage verb, so I can't really directly compare. Outside of like listening to projects that like friends have used it in, and other artists that I know have vintage verb. But I will say, like, Room it's nice, but it is very cold. It's a very digital sounding reverb. Which can be useful, but a lot of times you want a little bit of that kind of lower mid range boost that vintage products offer. Is a little bit of just extra power in the range which honestly a lot of tracks I've noticed that feel very digital. Like if you look at them through a spectral analyzer, there's like a little bit of a dip around like 150 to 300 hertz. Every single time.
Their sub absolutely cranked, but they're missing that.
They're missing all that warmth, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I think the vintage verb is really good at filling the space that Room can't fill. And I think actually Valhalla Room has a lot of similarity between that and Serum's reverb.
Oh,
Because
really?
Serum's reverb is super digital. If
Yeah,
you
yeah,
set it
yeah.
to the plate setting or the room setting or one of
Yeah,
the
there's
setting
plate
that
and
isn't
hall.
default.
Yeah.
Yeah, the setting that isn't default. I don't. That
It defaults to
you can get
hall, I
these.
believe. Yeah.
Yeah, you can get these super metallic sounding reverbs out of them, which is great in some scenarios, but it just does not offer what most people are looking for. And it's actually really funny. It's that sound, that metallic sound that you get is just so noticeable. And I've heard it in everything from like new school bro step to like Moody Goods. I don't know if you know his series of like mixtapes called "Music to Go Fuck Yourself To."
I
Um,
actually I sleep on Moody Good and I
ooh,
shouldn't. I know I'm so bad.
ooh,
I know.
ooh.
I'm never gonna get to +1 RMS if I don't.
Yeah, no, exactly. You got to get to like the -1 lefts to truly appreciate it.
That's
But
true.
his "Music to Go Fuck Yourself To," which came out in like 2015, 2014.
Mm.
This would have been when Serum was first coming out. You can already hear that exact like metallic reverb in that. And the first time I heard it, I was like, no, there's no way he would have used that Serum. But yeah, it is. But it if you can use it and if it applies to the situation, then it's great. But it's just not great for most scenarios.
Absolutely. Have you ever tried Pro R from Fat Filter?
I haven't. I have it, but I haven't used it. Is
Give
that
it.
something I should be using?
I would say give it a shot. I mean,
Okay.
I used Room for a long time as my primary reverb. If I had Vintage Verb, I might not have gone down this path. But like at this point, I switch between Pro R and
Right.
Soundtoys Little Plate. Like
I don't have any Sound Toy stuff. I should be getting Sound Toy stuff.
I'm not going to say anything, but yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
you
know.
need
I know.
to
It's
get it.
on. It's on the top of my list.
Yeah, just because they're, I mean, Soundtoys is definitely one of my favorite plugin manufacturers, but like, if I want something that sounds digital but warm, I love Little Plate. But like for something that can be warm, can be cold, can be realistic, can be really fake or artificial sounding, like Pro R is probably the most versatile reverb I've ever used. Like
Right.
it's
Okay.
so fun, and if you have it, like you should definitely play around with it. Like because it has like two separate EQ curves, one
Pardon me.
for decay and response. Oh, no worries. One for like decay and response of different frequencies, and one for actually EQing it.
Okay. Is the yellow one the EQ?
The yellow one is actually the response. Here, why don't you share your
Oh, that is
screen
the
and then
response.
we can
Oh yeah, I can do that.
show it off real
Let's.
quick. Also, Noise Signal is asking if either one of us have Eventide's Black Hole, which I don't have.
I
I don't
don't.
have. Oh no, excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah, the yellow line is the EQ. The yellow
That is
line
the
is EQ. I got the colors flipped in my head.
right.
But that's how you sculpt the outgoing signal, and then the blue line is like it says in the top left, the decay rate EQ. So for this
Oh,
one,
yeah.
there's a huge cut in the decay of signals around 10K, around 8K, and there's a little bit of a boost around 800 hertz or 600 hertz.
Yeah.
So that'll influence the character of the sound. So
makes sense.
yeah, I
Okay, and-
love this
yeah.
reverb. Honestly, do you
Okay.
have Black Hole? Do you have any Eventide
I
stuff?
don't. I've never. I. Let's see. Um. That's not.
Nope.
Nope. Don't think so. Oh.
There you go.
Oh no. I don't. That's from UAD, and that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Nope.
So looks like
Rip.
not, but still, I think that's a thing. Like, I mean, I've heard a lot of good things about Eventide's products. Like, I know, like not Mr. Bill, but the Whittler uses Black Hole. I know a couple of other people who use it. So it seems like a fun plugin, but I've never messed with it.
Right.
Are there any other like weird effects that you like? Any other glitch effects or anything?
Good question. I mean, it's Noisia has talked about it forever and a day, so you know it's got to be good. But also, it's from Kiloheart, so you know it's got to be good. Disperser.
Oh yeah.
That's really great to just put on any sort of wobbly, wonky sort of thing. But outside of that, I think some of the few so I'm really into delays. That's got to be one of my favorite effects.
Okay.
I've got a delay pedal from TC Electronic, which is a Danish company who makes guitar pedals. And I rarely use it on my guitar itself, but I just run like audio through my guitar pedals, and that's a delay and a looper as well. It's got some really cool modes, but with delays, you can really get a lot of interesting sounds. So there's two that I would recommend to anybody in chat because they're free, called Backmask. One Backmask is they're both delays. Backmask is a weird delay that you can tempo sync, but I believe you can also like not tempo sync it. You can do alternative delays, so only every other delay plays, and like a chaos delay and things like that. And then Hysteresis, which is from Glitch Machines, which that is just something that literally has a panic button because it can get so out of control. But they're both delays. They're both super incredible things that I'd highly recommend looking into.
For sure, I will. Sorry, I'm just pulling them up so I can link them to people in chat.
Oh yeah, I should be doing that.
No worries, I got you. So here is Hysteresis or Hysterisis. Hysteresis, I think. And then this one is Backmask, right from Freak Show Industries.
Yep, that's them.
Awesome. So there's a couple of plugins for people to check out. Are there any other cool plugins, or do you want to move on to the Fog Room VIP?
Well, so you actually cued me into to Soka Labs, who do incredible things. They're great for spectrum analysis and any super nerdy stuff that you want.
Yeah.
They're all free. Just you might as well get them. And so like you've got an oscilloscope and spectrum analyzer and stuff like that from them. But outside of that, I actually started just using free stuff. So I would go on vstforfree.com and just sort by Mac only, and then just download all of them and then see what I could get out of them. So that's how I found some of the interesting things. But honestly, you can just find a bunch of like interesting things on there. You find hidden gems that are all free, and you can like Ozone Elements is free right now for this week. You guys should go check that out, or Ozone Essentials.
Ozone 8 Elements or something.
Yeah, and that's free. You might as well just pick up all the free stuff. I mean, if you have the space, you can just mess with them. If they make one sound that's interesting, you got your money's worth.
That's a good way of looking
who cares if they who cares if they do one thing, only one thing, and they're not really versatile? It's still free. You might as well.
Oh yeah.
So
I mean, I think that's actually kind of like a split kind of philosophy that I have noticed people have. They're either in one of two camps, where it's like they save up all their money and they buy like a couple of really expensive things, or they're like the people who go and hunt for as many different free things as possible. And they both lead to very different sonic results, but like obviously I don't think that one is necessarily better or worse than the other, but like you definitely seem like someone who's more in kind of like the get the budget things, not just because they're free, but because a lot of times the imperfections in them are what give them their character and are what make them something that no one else can really have. Exactly.
And I think that especially with the more popular free VSTs, if they're free and they're popular, people are going to download them, and beginners are going to download them. So you're going to sound like a lot of beginners. So you kind of have to be careful of that, and that's why you essentially have to go crate digging for VSTs.
Yeah, it's a good analogy.
But I think there are a few like must-have save up VST sort of things, like the whole FabFilter bundle, or anything from FabFilter, anything from UHE, anything from Xfer. Like Cthulhu and Serum. There's like a few must-haves that are really just your workhorses, and then there's the flavor things on top where you can just go hunting for hours and hours on end and find the most interesting things. So
because like I'm more of like I consider myself a bargain hunter, but I've like moved away from free stuff. So like I literally spend like an hour every morning and every evening on the audio production deals subreddit. Because the whole thing for there is like, all right, what's on sale? What's coming out that's having an intro price? And
Exactly.
what thing can I take a gamble on to see like what it will do? And you know, you can
And-
find some
yeah.
fun things.
And that's what like Plugin Boutique is like really good for that.
Absolutely.
It's a nice home space for that, but of course it doesn't catch everything, so it's handy to be part of the other subreddits.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that's a good like hour on the first subject.
Excuse me. Do I need to bring down my record collection of like 200 that are sitting directly above me? You can't even see it.
Oh
Let's
goodness!
see if
Here we
you
go.
can.
Oh, we're on an adventure. Hold on, let me make you full screen.
There you go. There's a few.
1 second. Hold on. There we go. There's a bunch of crates to go
sitting
dig
up there.
through. Have you sampled any of those records?
Oh yeah, so all of those are so I've got a few let's see here. I've got this that some people might recognize. Let's see. Mr. Bill and Ouse.
Hey,
There you go.
nice.
Set that over there. I've got a few like from Inspected Records. I've got some from like Copycat and people like that. But I also have a lot from like the 80s and the 70s and things like that. But most of the things that I have end up falling under like funk and things like that. So unless I'm writing something like glitch hop, it's going to be a bit tough to sample. But I have found a few gems. But
Nice.
yeah.
For sure. Well, I guess with that, we can start to move forwards onto the
Yeah,
next
sure.
project. So I guess same sort of thing. Like you can just kind of mute for a second and we can listen to this new track. Do you want me to share it or like do you want me to post a link to it in chat or do you want to kind of keep it private for now? Because it is a private link.
You can just keep it private for now. Honestly, it's not a
Okay.
huge deal, but yeah.
For sure. All right. So this is, I'll just show people kind of what the song is. I'll give y'all a little bit of a preview as to the waveform, which has been a big conversation topic lately.
Should I be giving a backstory to this?
Yeah, why not? Why don't you
It's-
tell us a little bit about this
Just a-
song?
Yeah, it's just a quick backstory to the song that I was I'll say the song that was most well received on my most recent album, which was I call it my first actual album. Was called Yuru. I think it was the first song on that album, and it was that was the most well received one, probably because it was the most banger song of them all. The rest were sort of experimental, but there were like I had written that about 2 years ago now, and there are things I wanted to fix or remedy. And there were things that I just thought I could have done better. And so I had originally started the idea of making an EP of 4 different VIPs of the same song and seeing if I could take them in 4 different directions. And
Okay.
they would have all had different names. So this is the Fog Room VIP. It's the only one that remains, but I had another one called the Fuzz Face VIP, which was a Neurofunk take on it. And I had a few others, but this was the only one that survived because after I finished this one, because I intended to work on them all individually, but I got inspired to work on this one, and this one it inhaled all the other ones in the sense that I took ideas from all the other ones and turned it into one, just because I thought I'm so far working in this and I'm so far invested in this. I don't think I have the energy to do that 4 more times with the same song. I'm going to get bored. So this was the first one I worked on and the only one that survives. So
For sure. All right. Well, let's take a listen to it. I actually have to use the restroom, so I might miss the first minute or so of this. I'm going to put you up on the big screen real quick.
no worries.
Make
I'm
sure everyone
going to
can
be
see
eating
your
my
face.
noodles, so everybody can enjoy that.
Yeah. So I'll play this and then I'll be right back. as this fades out. Man, that was a wonderful track. So
You
many
can
different
definitely see
moods.
it's several songs in one.
Oh yeah, like we won't like. This is one thing that I notice about a lot of your tunes, is like just these huge dramatic tone shifts from the beginning to the end. Like your songs always tell a story, and that's something that I love about your music. Is just how like evolving it is in the course of like just one track, let alone like your entire like discography.
Right.
Like it's just these huge major like it's a really interesting balancing act. So I guess can you tell us how this song got started? I mean, 'cause
Sure.
I guess we kind of know how it got started, where it's because the
Yeah.
VIP. But like, how did this version of the project get started?
Yeah. So in the second, here, let me readjust this. In the second, hold on. There we go.
Perfect.
In the second drop of the original, there was a much looser sort of feeling compared to the first drop. So the first drop was just your typical banger, edity, complextro neuro sort of thing that I don't know, somebody like Chi would be known for, or Culprit or something like that. But the second drop was a lot more open, and that inspired the first section, or the first drop in this song. Because I really like the idea. If you listen to the original, a lot of the snares in the second one aren't actually snares. They are me literally just like hitting drumsticks together and adding a really short delay to it. So it like pings back and forth between the ears.
Okay.
And that was essentially what the entire drop was built off of. It was built off of the idea of how many banger basses can I fit into a very abstract and minimalist drop. And so that's what that came into, and that's what led to. So the first drop in this tune. Should I be sharing my screen
Yeah.
so I can?
Now it seems like a good time to just shift over to there. Yeah.
Let's see. Does that work? Sweet.
Yes, I think I might need to readjust the layout. Hold on. What are we doing wrong here? Alright, for some reason it's not letting me see the there we go. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Yep.
Let me just
We're
set
good.
this up. There we go. And you are good to go. This should be pretty much everything on your screen, so just have fun. You have the floor.
Sweet. Yeah, so the first section, and by the way, this is a stemmed out version because otherwise my computer would absolutely die, because the original is 133 channels that my computer would not be able to handle. But the first drop is very barren, and if you literally just listen to the kicks and snares, you've got. Oops, I got to remember to not solo anything, but include my voice. If you listen to the kick and the snare and the sort of percussion, that's where most of the textures are. I mean, I've got some textures in the textures channel, go figure. But most of it is within the percussion because, as I said before, I am a percussionist at heart, and I am much better at doing drums than I am at anything else. So that's always where I start. So if you just listen to that on its own, actually, let's include the textures. That's what that sounds like. Is that loud enough?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So essentially, you've got just a. Fuck! I keep forgetting. How about I just mute everything else until I need it? You've got a kick and snare, which are just which actually change throughout the song, so they're not super static. The kick may stay the same, but I like playing around with my snares, so I have a habit of changing that. But the kick and snare you've got like pretty heavy body and things like that. And I'm not really a huge fan of snares with like giant tails. I mean, later on you get this sort of snare with the huge like giant metal tail, but I'm much more a fan of that tight sounding snare, even if it has a little bit of a lead up. And same with the percussion. The percussion's relatively like tight. You've got fills and things which don't have much of a tail. It's mostly transient.
It's
and
very
actually,
dark and very wet. I'm noticing.
exactly. There may actually be. I swear I've got I have some fills somewhere. Maybe it's under the glitches section. I don't even know what my own project files are. I should probably. Anyway, we'll get back to that later. So essentially, I like very tight percussion over top of very wet other things, which ends up being so just a simple sub, which sounds like this. You've got a bit of movement within like a bit of I've that's essentially just FM. I've got a sine wave FM'd with another sine wave with a little bit of noise on top and then compressed together to get a teeny weeny bit of distortion, but most of that is coming from the bass itself. Which that sound, that original sound, let's see if I can boost it in volume a little bit. That's from the original track.
Okay.
And so there are bits and pieces I've taken from the original track just as a callback, which is actually, there is the one thing I sort of regret but don't regret at all from the original is taking a vocal sample, which is sort of memey, and I'm totally not sad about it. Would you like to suck? You've got the suck sample in there. Let's see if I can turn that. Suck. You've got that, which I absolutely love. It's from the original, and I couldn't go without putting that back. And same with this like moan. Oh nope, that's not it. Where is it? Nope. Who knows?
It's somewhere around there.
Anyway, yeah. That sort of the callbacks is what really, I guess, what makes this VIP not just a completely different song. Because if you listen to it and you listen to the original, there aren't a lot of similarities. I mean, maybe you've got no, not even the chord progression is the same. You've got the intro synth, and that's about it. But we should actually probably start at the beginning. The beginning, you've got some gamelons, which I just absolutely adore. Super out of tune, they don't fit at all in the diatonic scale, but that's okay. That's what gives it character. You've just got like some background noise and things like that. Mm-hmm. So that is essentially the intro. The drop just is more textures, and that is the closest of a callback to the original song as you're ever going to get, because that is just almost like a direct update of the second drop. And just so I forgot to mention, these impact and effect sounds down here, where you'll essentially just see it played once and then never again. These were all added afterwards as just extra little textures and things that sound like, well, I can just solo them all and they sound like this. Just other extra little details where I go through my final pass and just add as much as I can. Then you've got the first section where I actually went kind of weird with it, because I had the idea of this being my most experimental song out of the 4 different VIPs that I was going to do. So this section is actually in 3116. And later on, you've got a section in 7/8, I think. But the reason why this is in 3116, it doesn't quite sound like it, but it sounds like it's in 4/4 for the most part, until you cut off half of the last quarter note, and that essentially just makes it sound like it's jumping a bit, which sounds like this. Whoops, we'll turn off that metronome. Actually, let's play it a bit further. Let's play it from here. And so you can see it stops a bit quick, and that sort of just gives it something interesting to listen to, because otherwise this is a buildup that's a minute long, which is quite long. It's like prog house levels, but that's okay. It sort of fits. If you can make it interesting, then it's all right. This is actually the first time that I introduced the chord progression, which sounds like this. way at the back, but it doesn't really come in until further. It's just a nice little call forward instead of a call back.
Mhm.
Then you've got a little breakdown here, which is just that was actually to transition into the 7/4 section, which is at 218 beats per minute instead of 109. So the reason why I sped it up to double is because at 7/4 I wanted to originally have a drop that was double in length, but it got sort of tedious towards the end. So what I did was I ended up cutting half of each section and just combining it so that it's essentially the first part missing the second part, the third part, and missing the fourth part, as if I split it into quarters.
Mm-hmm.
So the first half of this really sticks to the 7/4, where I've got in my fills and things. I've got it matching to the 7/4 grid, which I won't put the metronome on. It's really annoying, but it sounds like this. And you've got evenly spaced kicks and snares just to keep the listener relatively grounded. But then after that, I actually just go straight into a 4/4, or what sounds like 4/4. It's actually not 4/4. It's a weird every 7/16 notes hi-hat pattern, just to make it a bit more palatable, I guess.
Okay.
Which sounds like. And if you were to put the metronome over that, it's going to sound completely off. But
it subdivides the beat.
Exactly. And I've just got fills and things throughout, and this is more playing off of how many textures can I get out of one bass sound. So you've got like some ambiance over top, which just sounds like this. And that's just like chords sidechain to the kick and snare. But then you have a lot of like really textured basses that sound like this. And things like that. That just grow and expand and contract. What's the original song? Did I miss him? Oh yeah, the original song's out. You can go listen to that right now if you want to. Yeah. Yeah, this is a very heavy textural section. I actually have some more background textures, but that doesn't really matter. And then I've got some more glitches just layered over top. And it was just essentially pack as many sounds as I can into this without it sounding dumb. And that leads on to the build, which, actually another reason for me going to 218 beats per minute instead of 109 is because then I go down to 172, and it's easier to go from, or it's smoother, at least it felt, to go from 218 to 172 than to go from 109 to 86 beats per minute.
Okay.
Because all of the clips that are right here in the middle are all warped, and I believe at least, or were warped in the original project file, or they were made in MIDI. So of course you don't need to warp that. And so because they were warped, I had to try to find the most pleasant sounding, like the way to get from 218 to 172 without a bunch of artifacts. So essentially I landed on this, and the build is pretty simple. This is actually the first time that I introduced the chords, and it may be the only time I introduce the chords. Whoops, they sound like this. So you've got that, but other than that, so that's just a zebra patch, because I love zebra, and it's literally the default patch without the decay on it. But let's see, we've just got a sub. Then we go into this halftime drop, which was actually really inspired by Wolg. He was working on a project of his on a live stream, and you've got these like really muted kicks and snares, which I'm just gonna mute that again so you can listen to it. And it's literally just a kick and a snare with a low pass on it. Which sounds like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got some percussion, which again, these are just textured, which go throughout the entire thing, which if you add on top, they sound like this.
So it sounds almost like there is like a halftime snare in the percussion that's separate from the main snare.
Yeah, I think this may be like a loop I had previously made, but I repurposed it into this, and it was originally, I guess that would be full time because this is in, or no, that it would have been halftime because this is in full time. So if you just listen to the percussion itself. You could almost imagine it in a halftime sort of feel, but it isn't. It is in that double time drum and bass sort of feel. And this was a very sparse section on purpose because it was that sort of relaxing from the super heavy textural sections of the previous two drops, and it lends itself rather nicely into going into the last section, which we're not quite at yet. But then the rest of it is literally just ambiances, pads, chords, and things like that. So you've got like the sub comes in a little heavier in the second half, and you got like a bass over, like a mid bass that just copies the sub just to make it a bit thicker, and the chords just continue. So it doesn't really develop throughout this. It just lets the person enjoy it and enjoy that downtime and let them relax from the previous few drops. But then it goes into the last portion, which cuts from 172 to 115, which I believe, if I remember correctly, if you were to check how long, I think it's 3/8 notes, how long 3/8 notes is on, no, that's 3 beats. Yeah, 3/8 notes is in 172. It's 523 milliseconds. Yeah, and 1/4 note at 115 is 522 milliseconds. So it's as if you're transitioning from 3/8 notes to 1/4 note, and it's a nice, easy
Metric
way of
modulation,
transitioning rather than just cutting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, kind of just to stop on this for just a moment. Like, I notice in a lot of your music, there's a lot of meter changes, a lot of tempo changes, and a lot of just kind of like just straight up just metric modulation, where the pulse continues but is reinterpreted in a different kind of context. And I'm assuming that is like a big part of your background as, you know, a drummer, as someone who's invested a lot of time into percussion. Do you find that to be a natural byproduct of your songwriting process? Or is it something that you try and go out of your way to do?
So honestly, I think without it, my songs would be really boring, but that's coming from my perspective. And the perspective I'm coming from is a jazz fusion prog rock scene where that is just rampant. And the chord changes and the polymeter and the polyrhythm is all over the place. And I think me introducing that is just, it's what I do in order to feel like I'm not being really boring. Which, I mean, I've gotten feedback from other people on my songs that don't include that. They say it sounds fine, but to me, it feels like it's missing something, and it's kind of boring, and it doesn't have that sort of thing that makes you stop and think, as if you were to have like a fully electronic song, and then halfway through you've got a samba break. It's just like an interesting thing that sort of makes you remember the song. Pardon the speeding cars outside.
All good.
So it's something that I feel like sets apart the song, at least within my discography, because it's something that I can manipulate to such an absurd extent, and I try and manipulate it to such an absurd extent that it's just dumb and it's funny and it makes you remember it. Like the 3116 portion. If you think about it, songwriting wise, it doesn't add anything to it. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but it's funny and it makes you think. Just like this 7/4 section, I could probably accomplish the same thing in 4/4, but it's just, if I can do it in a dumb way, I want to do it in a dumb way.
I mean, it's not even really in a dumb way. It's in a way that is arguably very subversive, because
Right.
you keep the pulse very, very well whenever you're going through these time changes. Like for me, I found it kind of fascinating how like kind of swingy it felt, because to me,
Right.
I was perceiving what I'm assuming is the 7/4 section as 4/4, where it's like 1 2, a little bit of a break, 3 4,
Yeah.
and like the gap between the second beat and the snare on what I perceived as the 3 was so vast, that like even though it is in odd meter, it feels cohesive. It just feels almost like drunk, or it feels almost kind of rubato in a way.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because like that is higher in kind of energy or tension than the section that follows, which has faster drums. It has
And
way
it's
more going on.
cohesive. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think I could have definitely done that 7 section in 4/4 where literally I just drag the snare off the grid and don't even care about that, and do it that way, which I've done plenty of times. But if I can hide a little Easter egg, like the people who like drag the sound file into their DAW and try to match the tempo and everything, they find out it's actually in 7/4. Like, I guess 90% of the people who will listen to this in the wild won't know that it's in 7/4, nor will they care. But for those who care to check, it's an interesting, fun little thing to hide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Which actually is the thinking behind most of my transitions. It's, if I can do it in a way that somebody can discover, in the sense that if I can do it in a way that's thought out rather than just being, I'm just going to drag the snare off the grid a little bit and make it sound wonky, or if I
Yeah.
can do it in a way that people can understand and figure out themselves, then I would like to do it that way, because that gives that gives people like a motive to listen to my music more than once.
Yeah.
So,
Well, what about the jazz section we're going into?
right. So this is me literally just so this was about the time that I got into like more jazz fusion, because this was written over a course of several months, just because I had stopped and started and worked on other things and things like that. And so what this section essentially comes down to is a texture over top of a harp, over top of a bass, over top of live drums. So the only thing that wasn't recorded live was the harp and the synths, and this little like weird beep that I put, just to give it some more energy. But if you were to listen to just the drums on their own, which I'll mute everything
Yeah, they
else,
sound super live.
yeah, you've got the like super tight drums that fit with the rest of the track in that sense.
And you played this live yourself?
Yeah, so all of this was I don't know if you've seen a video that Bill uploaded, where how to write jazz or something like that, where he literally recorded himself playing drums randomly for like a few minutes, then chopped it up and chopped up him playing chords randomly, and so forth and so on, until it turned into a jazz song. That's essentially what this is. This was me noodling around on drums, and then of course chopping it up afterwards to make it cohesive, rather than just playing quote unquote random notes.
Yeah.
And then processing the shit out of it because I don't have necessarily very good mics. But that leads to so you've got the first half, which again, weird. This is a chord progression that is 12 bars long instead of the standard 8 or 16 or whatever. And I think you can, yeah. It's a 12-bar chord progression, and then it leads into the second half of this, which is a sort of like drum solo fill thing that comes in every 3 bars, which sounds super off the grid, and you don't really know what to expect or when to expect it, but it is actually thought out in that sense. But you've got these like very tight drums layered over the much more like, so I don't have synesthesia, but I think of sound in terms of visuals. So I think of this as sounding very floral, like flowers. Like if you listen to just the chords and the harp and textures, it sounds very floral to me, and I don't know why. So having that very airy and light feeling going over this like tight drum, and like this isn't actually a sub, it's a live recorded bass, which sounds like, which is it is what it is, just a nice background. And that was the thought process really behind that, which then goes us to the outro, or brings us to the outro, which there's a few hidden Easter eggs. I tend to hide a lot of Easter eggs in my songs. There's a few hidden Easter eggs, which I'll divulge to you guys because you guys are special. In this, it's just fade out on the drums, fade out on the bass, fade out on the chords, I believe, but we can take a listen to that and see if there's anything interesting. Let's crank it. No, there's nothing interesting there. But in the synths and textures, essentially what the textures are if you listen to it,
it's like a clock.
That clock and that rain sound is from the original. And at the very end, when it sort of slows down and almost sounds like it's breaking apart, that is also from the end of the original, just to a more drastic extent.
Okay.
And then, so the synths, these are a bunch of just different textures that I recorded both on the guitar. I don't know if you can see, I don't know if my webcam is up right now, the guitar that's back there.
Yeah.
Which I just recorded noodling around with. And then a contact instrument called the, oh God. Okay, it's going to bother me if I can't think of this. I need to figure it out. It's under the Metallophones category. It is a Celesta. That's what it's called. It's called Celesta.
Yeah. The very bright kind of like tiny piano.
The sort of I don't know how you would describe that.
I just call it the Harry Potter piano.
It's the fairy sounding one.
Because whoever it was either John Williams or Hans Zimmer who did the first Harry Potter. And I think it was John Williams, and like he like abused the Celesta or the Celeste in that score. So it's one of my favorite pianos. But yeah.
So I've got that sort of, so everything in this last section is very sustained, it's got a very long release and a long tail. So you can hear that Celeste over top. Yeah. There we go. Just putting a limiter on the master so I don't clip. And so I've just got a bit of like guitar noodling, which goes on towards the end. And the goal of that was the goal of that was essentially to make a very reminiscent sounding song or reminiscent sounding ending, as if it was like really like sad, which is why deep down in the background, when actually, which there's only one person who has ever noticed that when listening to it, which is Proc, who's in this chat. He pointed this out. At the very end is a very small, very quiet vocal that says "I'm sorry," which I'll play really quick, and then you've got the sounds that that an iPhone makes when you tap on the keyboard, which I believe spells out in Morse code "I'm sorry" as well.
Oh, nice.
But and nobody would ever figure that out unless they checked. But it sounds like this without everything else.
Sorry.
Let's bring that up in volume. It's so quiet.
I'm sorry.
And that's it. It's just a quiet little thing that nobody's ever going to notice. Nobody's going to take notice of. But it's nice to fill that in and have that as the last little thing, as if somebody's saying like bye to somebody else, and then the ending is the clock winding down, and that's how it ends. And that is, it's not the last song on my album. I can actually play you the last song on my album later on if we have some time. But
sure.
But this is the last proper song on that. So that is the Uru VIP.
That's a great narrative structure, honestly. Like the whole track is, and like I just said at the beginning, like your songs have a story to them, even if there's no vocals, even if there aren't any lyrics. Like you can clearly tell, like the emotional drive of each section moving into the next one, and I think it ties back to what you were saying about how like you think of music very visually, and I really feel as though when a piece of art is kind of well intentioned, not necessarily like in the sense of like it's trying to do good, but as in it has a focus, it has a goal that it wants to communicate, it has a message it wants to tell. It translates very readily into other art forms. Like you could see this song as a painting, as a movie, as a book, and I think that's for me that's a big hallmark of a talented artist, which I consider you one. But I don't know. It's just, I think that it is something for people to try and take away from this. It's kind of the big thing for me is like, for people who might be struggling with making music, with making whatever their art form is, like try to think about what the structure is, what the story is, who the characters are, what is the reason this song has to exist, and what can you do to bring that out. And I think this is a good example of how you can do that.
Right. And I would definitely agree with that. I think as I was talking about earlier, probably I'm coming to realize this now, probably the reason why I'm into design stuff is because it is so easily transferable, as with any art form. I mean, you've seen countless pieces of first off, books turned into movies is the obvious, but you've got like pieces of artwork turned into music turned into artwork. You've got all these people who build their careers out of the audio visual connection between the two, and I think that is, if you can tap into it, it gives a really, really interesting perspective on, or a really new fresh taste on your music, and I think it is definitely something worth looking into.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted to show off? Also, it's Frozen. Are you talking about for Silent Science? I can post their socials now.
Oh, yeah.
So we got that one, and we got this one. There we go. But yeah, is there anything else you wanted to talk about with this project, or do you want to kind of move towards the the more abstract section?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think this song is worth a listen when it's out. And of course, if how people listen to music is totally up to them if they want to put it on the background. I don't actually have a problem with background like wallpaper music being used as wallpaper.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
some people are like really against that, but I genuinely think wall. Ooh, who followed?
Nonpus3.
Nice.
Thank you for that follow,
Um,
Nonpus.
I think if how people use music is up to them, and if they want to use it for like usefulness, as in here, let me stop sharing my screen really quick. There we go. If people want to use music as wallpaper, I am all for it, and I think they should do that, and I do that on a regular basis. And I enjoy it. But if people want to sit down and actually listen to something and really learn what the creator was thinking about at that time, they should definitely do that. And with a
Absolutely.
good pair of monitors or headphones.
Absolutely. Um,
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess what we could do then is kind of take a step back, and I have a few questions that kind of relate to your process. So, I guess the first question I would have is, do you consider yourself a more proactive or a more reactive artist? Because like we know Mr. Bill very much considers himself a reactive artist, as a,
Right.
like a contrast to a proactive artist, where he uses the process of writing music to write the music. Are you like that, or do you have like a goal when you go into the DAW?
Well, I I remember a really good quote from him. It's not a quote because I don't remember word for word, but I have a general idea that he gave off in one of his live streams where somebody asked, would his music sound the same or different if he was left to his own devices in a room for a year with um, no external influences? And if I remember correctly, what he said was yes and no. To an extent, he himself evolves just by getting better, but of course, there is that external um, influence that you get, especially from the internet, because it's so widely available
Oh yeah.
nowadays. There's no way that you can't be influenced by music, and everybody and everybody's just innovating all the time that it's impossible to not get new ideas as it goes. And I think in that sense, I'm very much the same. I am very reactive, and I'll, I'll I used to not find new music very often because I would stick closely to what I knew, and I would stick closely to the songs that I knew really well because I like knowing what's coming next. Even in life, that's a whole another topic.
Yeah, it
But
is. Yeah.
I like really knowing what's coming next, and I like being able to follow along with that. But the excitement of finding new music that I would have never even dreamed possible, because especially if you bring somebody from the 1800s to 2010, even, they're not
Yeah.
going to understand what they hear because all they have as a frame of reference is acoustic instruments. However, I think if you were to bring somebody from now to 100 years in the future, they would have a much higher chance of understanding the music
Okay.
because they've already been subjected to such odd sounds. Unless, of course, in the future, music becomes this weird telepathical, completely different thing. But
Yeah.
if music is the same form of media as it is today, 100 years from now, I think we have a much higher likelihood of actually understanding it. And I went on a complete tangent. I'm sorry.
No, you're all good.
Um,
It's the whole point of this.
that's true. Yeah. To summarize, I think I am a reactive artist, and
Mhm.
I try to be a reactive artist because I think I'm much more creative when I have those influences compared to listening to the same set or the same playlist on repeat for years and years, which is what I used to do.
I
So
get that. Totally. So are there any like big challenges that you have? Like it feels weird to say that, but like, what would you say are your flaws? Like, what are the areas that you're working on right now as an artist?
No, that's totally fair. I think I think I definitely need to get better at well, one, procrastination, which I thank God I replace it with something like decently useful. I end up, instead of like writing music, I end up organizing my music, which I mean is better than nothing. But I need to like actually stop making so many 8-bar sketches and actually start taking my own advice and compiling them into music.
Hmm.
But outside of that, I think being more coherent to a point, because I definitely think it is part of my style to have such borderline random songs that you don't know where they're going to progress to next. I think that's just become an innate part of my style.
Hmm.
However, I think having a motif, and because like I cannot come up with melodies for shit. I'm so bad at coming up with melodies. I huge respect to Max Martin and people who write pop songs. I could never ever do that. But I think, yeah, I think currently my motifs lie within my sound design,
Hmm.
which it's okay for things like neuro, and but it's tough if you want to branch out, and I want to branch out because I like making so many different genres of music and experimenting. I don't like staying on the same thing. I get bored very easily.
Yeah.
But being having motifs be such a difficult thing for me really limits me to like neuro, IDM, and like bro step, which I never write, or like
Yeah.
anything in the dubstep category, anything that's like sound design heavy,
Yeah.
which I'm fine with, but it's not, after a while, it's not very fulfilling, which I wish it was,
I get you.
but I'm not the kind of person who can make the same sort of thing for years on end and become super popular based on that. But yeah, I'm no dead mouse.
Totally. Well, I mean, on the other side of things, like, what about things that you've learned, or maybe things that you feel like you've overcome, in, let's say, like the past year, even?
I think well, there's two ways to approach that. There's the things that you can learn just by doing it over and over again, and literally just refining and spending your time on it, like synthesis. I think there is an element of synthesis that you just need to learn what sounds good and what inherently sounds bad. Same with like mixing. You develop an ear for it, and you develop a an ability to make drums and things like that. And there's things you can develop an ability to, which or an ability of, which I definitely think I've improved on. I think I've gotten much better at making my own drums, and I think I've gotten
Hmm.
much better at sound design and escaping from what I know and really experimenting. But I think on the other side, I think there's the more personal things of getting better at and overcoming your own personal struggles. Like for, yeah, I know I need
No,
to
you're fine. You're
take a,
fine.
there you
Just
go.
got to get your
Um,
stretch in there. Yeah.
you need your hourly break,
You're all good.
but I think the personal things that I've overcome is much closer to straying away from what I know, because what I know is what I know is going to sound good. Because if I know it, I know it's going to sound good, and I've refined those things that I know to a point, and I will stick with those for forever and a day. And of course, it's totally fine to take those things and reference them. And of course, that's how people build a brand. People know you for your sound and for specific things that you may drop in every single song, and that's your motif. That is
Yeah.
your motif based on your alias. But breaking from that and being confident in breaking from that is where you really start to get interesting things that you would have never found before. So I think like the whole thing about putting in these Easter eggs, or using meter modulation
Hmm.
or interesting chords that are non-diatonic and things like that. that is my first step towards that. And I don't think I'm there all the way. I think this is the first step towards really breaking myself out of that mold and really just not caring and doing whatever. But I'm not there yet. It's still a process.
Well, and I think that that's honestly kind of a good thing. Like, I mean, because for me, like, the biggest thing that keeps me writing music and keeps me moving forwards as an artist is learning new things. And the idea that, like, there could be a point where I know what I want to know and I don't want to know anymore is, like, existentially horrifying to me.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, so go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that with that, knowing that I am not at my peak, that I am not as good as I could be, is more reassuring than the alternative.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I think with things, it's not as much for music. I guess it's more for the academic things like science, but it is a commonly quoted phrase where the more you know that there is to learn.
Yeah.
Like the more you know, the less you know. And I think to an extent that is the same with music. Like even just with mixing, I've started. Some of my classes are directed towards mixing, and I'm just dumbfounded by the amount of things I don't know. And it's just especially music, because of course there is definitely a science to it. There are things that objectively sound better than another. I think everybody would agree that a pink noise or a white noise mix would probably sound better than a brown noise mix.
Yeah.
Well, some people might enjoy that, but
yeah.
You know, there are some objective truths in music.
There's a reason why we don't like 3.5K to be, 50 decibels. Stuff like that.
There's a reason why 440 hertz sounds better. I mean, what? No, don't go into that. I'm not going to bring that onto your channel, I swear.
Oh, it's all good. I don't mind.
But
take shots. Take shots.
All right, fine. But I think that there are some truths that you can sort of lean on and you can sort of use to improve your overall quality of sound, but there is also that whole creative aspect, and that is where the person puts themselves into the music, and that is where one person writing 420 is better.
420.69.
Yeah, 420.69 is the best. I think if two people were to write the same song, they would come out sounding wildly different because they are two different people, even if they had the exact same skill level.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
But yeah, so that's my take on it. That's my hot take.
No, I dig it. No, I'm with that. I think that, being able to identify those little tiny, like, minute details is important. And, like, kind of just sticking on, like, the idea of, like, quote unquote objectivity in, like, mixing or producing, like, I think that one thing we learn over time is how the flaws in the past become the flavors of the present.
Right.
Like, lo-fi as a style exists.
That's literally just that.
Because we liked the sound of tape not having all those frequencies, consumer quality tape decks not being able to put out all the frequencies. Like, literally, distortion is a problem, but it is the thing that we crave the most in music.
Yeah.
Like,
nowadays anyway, yeah.
Oh yeah, especially nowadays. And I mean, like, listening to Zoomer music is like literally the bass boosted meme is the desired aesthetic.
That's true. That is true.
And
you crank the sub and that is the style.
Like, so it's like, even when there are like, quote unquote correct ways of doing things, you can exploit, at the very least, these imperfections. Like my favorite example is Billie Eilish. If you listen to Bad Guy, it sounds like her vocals are distorting under the sub, but if you listen to the multi-tracks, the sub is clean, her vocals are clean. They applied a tremolo effect to her vocal to make it sound like it's distorted. And because I heard a vocal a cappella of it, and you heard
so I heard that,
and all the little flares and stuff.
Yeah, that's okay. Oh, that's what you mean. Okay, yeah, that's totally fair. And I think, especially like with mixing, you can obviously take it in a creative aspect, and creative mixing is a huge part of sound engineers. That's why people hire specific sound engineers, because they're going after a specific sound.
100%. Yeah.
And I think there is definitely that room for creativity. But the flaws of the past really do define the future. I think that's a good mindset to keep in mind.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like, learn the good shit so that you can exploit it for the bad shit.
Exactly. And that's the reason why there was a noise floor over the entirety of the VIP. But yeah.
Definitely. So let's talk about songwriting for a little bit. How do you typically start a new project? What's your mindset? What do you gravitate towards, and how far do you usually find yourself getting in like the first session?
So I've actually got a plugin called Hofa Plugin Time or something like that, which I've just got on my master at all times. I've got Good Hertz's Can Opener Studio, which just basically refines the low end just so I don't have anything phasing. And then I have Fab Filter's Limiter, and then the Project Time on my master. That's just my standard mastering chain, just so I can check. And I've been looking at that more recently, and apparently I spend about 2.5 hours on the first sessions per song, and I only end up with about 8 bars or 16 bars, because the first sessions I will always dedicate to making the main sounds as good as possible, because those are the sounds you're going to be hearing through a lot of the tune. And a lot of like the textural stuff, you can hide it. You can hide the flaws. You can hide the crappy EQ and things like that, because it's such low level. I mean, it adds detail, and that's the best part of it, but you can sort of hide it beneath all the, if you have a really good main sound, you can have some pretty crappy other sounds underneath.
Yeah.
So I'll spend a lot of time on whatever the main motif is, the drums usually, and then I'll have like a sub, which is just like a clean sub, maybe with like the first harmonic, but that's about it. And then and that's about it. And then just the main motif. Actually, the most recent song that I started, I literally just started by making a drum beat and making that sound super, super nice. And then I left it, and that's it. I didn't make a motif or anything like that, because the motif is the drums, which will sometimes be the case. But that's how I usually go about. I just usually refine sound. So I'll end up with like 7 channels and like 8 bars. And that's it. And then I'll arrange it later, because I don't feel like arranging it right now.
Oh, for sure. So you like, have you ever had like that one session where it's like you wrote pretty much the whole song?
So in the early days, yes, but I think it's a problem with my workflow. That is actually something I want to improve, that I put so much time and effort into the things as I'm writing them. I can't just come up with an arrangement and then vary it as I go along, and then edit it down as I go along. That's the same reason why I mix as I go. I can't put all the faders at 0 or at negative infinity and bring them up one by one. I don't have the patience for that. So the fact that I put so much effort makes it so that my workflow is much less efficient, I'd say. I mean, in the long run, it's probably about the same as everybody else. I
Totally.
probably still get about as much done, but it feels less efficient because in each session, I'll maybe only get a section done. I won't make like an intro, drop, build to the next one and then leave it for the next session. I
Yeah.
can't do that. I maybe focus on half the drop, or things like that. I may make an intro or something like that, but getting these sounds so refined as I make them is like super like time and energy consuming. And
Totally.
it's not
Yeah.
like I have a huge amount of time anyway. Now I only have like max 4 hours to commit to writing on one thing, and after 4 hours anyway, it's like your ears are getting tired, you need to let them rest anyway. So it's,
Absolutely.
if you really want to be at your peak, then it's good to take a break. And after I take a break, then I'm on the Switch, and it's like I'm gone by that point. So
I get that. Yeah.
yeah.
Like the mindset has just kind of vanished, and I
Yeah.
get that. A
You
quick
get into moods.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. A quick question, kind of before we kind of move back from Glorious Rainbow. Do you produce nowadays more where we're at right now with like kind of the? It looks like you're in your kitchen.
Yeah, so it's essentially, so I just moved to the UK. That I am in the kitchen currently because the kitchen is also my bedroom and everything like that because I'm staying at a student apartment. I moved to the UK about 3 weeks ago now from the Netherlands, where I own had my own bedroom and everything, and that I had like instruments in and like soundproofing up and things like that. But right now, I'm not allowed to put anything up. So I've literally got next to me, I've got my monitors, my like my speakers, my monitor, a bit of my gear. I can't even fit everything. I've got my keyboard sitting on a shelf up above me,
Yeah.
hoping that it doesn't fall down on me. If it does and I die, then cool.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah, but I think for the most part, most of my producing is actually done in at the university because they've got like 4 different studios, which is professional studios. You've got like 32 input mixing boards that are like Alan Heath mixing boards that are just enormous, perfect, amazing speakers, like soundproofing their floating rooms and everything.
Oh wow.
So I mean, it's like 15 minutes away. I might as you just book it out and then you go and you write your tunes there. So I like, if I need to get a sketch out, I can do it here because this is where I've got like my hard drive and I've got all my samples and everything like that. And I produce most of my things here, but if I'm mixing and mastering, I do it there because why do it here when I've got so much better equipment at my disposal?
No, absolutely, absolutely.
So-
So with that, like, how do you go from like the initial sketch? Like, let's say you're, you got 8 or 16 bars, you got about a minute a tune, ready, and you want to start moving that into maybe not a finished song, but at least like a
In that
finished
direction.
skeleton, or like to like the over the 50% mark, so to speak.
Yeah. So I know people like Tom Cosm do literally before they start the tune, they'll just use warp markers, or not warp markers, like markers to say when they want the intro, the break, the build, the break, and things like that. And they'll literally plan out the tune before they even start writing. And I can't really do that because that's not the mindset that I'm in when I'm writing. And I'll actually share my screen so you can see this. There you go. You should be able to see that. So on the sidebar here, I've got my unfinished, basically organized into collaborations, originals, other, which is just like my catch-all for whatever else I want, and then remixes, which I've got a lot of. But if I'm doing an original song, first I'll start by organizing it by genre. So here this is literally copying these genres of reference playlists I have on Spotify, because then it roughly fits within those. So I've got everything from two-step to electro house to Latin. And I'll fit them into these by, let's just pick something like halftime, probably as a lot. Yeah. So I'll usually ignore the ones that say original. That's the old style that I used to do it. But nowadays I'll do it by BPM. key signature, and then just a way of explaining them, just to remind myself what they are. And then what I'll do if I want to start a new song, like if I've built up this library of 8-bar, 16-bar, essentially demos. They're not even demos; they're sketches. I'll just drag them into one, into a new, if they've got like a similar beats per minute or a similar key. I usually go by key because beats per minute is a bit easier to manage than keys. I'll literally just drag them into a new project file, and I'll take the bits that I like and scrap the bits that I don't, or I'll keep them around in a folder, and I'll start building out a drop, because these are actually smaller than drops. They're like maybe a quarter of a drop or a third of, or a half of a drop. And I'll start building a drop, and then I'll take elements of that and turn that into an intro, because usually I like to have my intros be relatively connected to the drop. Not that it has to be, but that's
Totally.
just an easy way of doing it. Then I'll probably duplicate how long the drop is, make a variation of it, and then I'll go into a build. So even though my my songs seem relatively different because they're so completely non-cohesive, they all do follow the same general pattern of like intro, drop, build, drop, build, drop, outro. It's just the drops are all completely different. So most of the time, if I'm doing like a standard song that you would listen to and be like, oh, that's Silent Science, it's most of the drops are all made from scratch. And they aren't originally made with any. Here, I'll stop sharing my screen. Sorry about that.
No, you're all good.
You have to remind me.
No, you're fine.
But I'll make like 3 drops from scratch, and then I will sort of take elements from each of the drops and put them in the other ones, so they sound at least kind of cohesive and don't sound like you're just mashing together 4 different or 3 different ideas. And then I'll fill that out in between, and then all you need is an outro. And of course, you can get really weird with that, because let's say your first drop is like a banger bro step drop, and the second drop is a Latin, literally just like a live Latin, like a samba,
like a salsa or samba,
something, and then the last is like, I don't know, like a glitchy IDM thing. You can take elements of each of those and put them in each of the others and create these weird things that you would have never, like, who puts Latin in halftime? I put Latin in halftime, but that is essentially my creative process when it comes to breaking out of that barrier of sticking to, I don't know, like a rhythm drop where you've got the build up and then the fucking 4 on the floor, whatever the hell, or like delayed wonky wubs, and that goes on for a while. Then you have another build up, and it's the exact same thing. So yeah,
totally. I mean, I'm with that, like, because it reminds me of what Bill talked about during his interview, where he talked a little bit about like the ideas he had on his last album, Epiphania.
Yeah,
we had these tunes called composites.
That's exactly, yeah.
And that sounds like that is the big crux of your songwriting process.
Ooh, who followed?
That wasn't a follow. That was actually a subscription. Thank you to Cody Mix and Plan. Wait.
Enjoy TwitchCon and your break.
Thank you so much, Cody Mix and Pan, for that 2-month sub. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Nice. I will definitely enjoy TwitchCon and the break, which I'll talk about more when we're done with the interview.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna stick around and listen to that.
It sounds like that is your process. Yeah, like it's just taking ideas that are disparate but similar in some way and figuring out, well, how do I mash up all these things into one idea?
Exactly, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be that similar. If it's the same key, I can probably work it into a similar tune. And actually, the more different, the better, because then you end up with some strange results. And that's all I'm going for. I'm just teasing the ear.
I'm with that. I mean, it's funny because it actually speaks to something that we talked about towards the beginning, where, you know, one of the first questions I asked was like, do you consider your music now to be a direct through line from the music you had before? And we talked about how, like, you know, you released the album that was just like 2 years worth of stuff, and it was just wildly different in style. But I think that in and of itself is your style, where you have all of these influences and you're trying to jam them all together into one new idea.
And that is what in the future I would love to be. Only problem is right now that's not very marketable, which I wish it was. And in the future, if I do indeed make it big, that is what I'm going to be aiming towards, because I do enjoy just making completely, seeing what my take would be on, I don't know, just a random genre that I've never written before. See what my take would be on fucking not punk. Like a 90s punk band. See if I can write that. Who knows? And I think that's just real. Yeah, pump. That's my favorite genre. No, that's but the only problem is right now, as I think I actually mentioned this before, it's Neuro and Halftime is what gets the views. And right now that's what I really need. I just need to sort of build a following before I can start spreading my wings. Now, of course, I can do that on my own, and I am doing that on my own. I've started categorizing my sketches, and I think I have something like 130 just like 8-bar loops. And those are all just wildly different, and those are all just me exploring and seeing how I can take influences that I have at the current moment and turn them into something that's sort of my style. But I save the Neuro songs for the Alias,
for the main
so
release.
I can gain a following.
Absolutely. I mean, that's smart. And I think we can talk a little bit once we're done with this section about kind of like marketing or branding and stuff like that. Because I think
Which
that
I'm
is
not very good at, but you know.
I mean, we can talk about it a little bit. But what I want to do to kind of like circle back towards kind of like the more generalized process. Once you have taken these sketches and kind of ideated them into basically a song, you got things working, you feel like it's maybe about, 80, 90% done. How do you get it finished? What is the process that you find works best for getting you over the finish line for your songs?
Yeah, so there's a few different approaches you can take, and people have their own style, of course. What I see a lot is people will do mix downs, and that will give them an idea of what's missing in their song, because they've gotten a fresh mix and they need to obviously add things to compensate for that fresh mix. But and another thing that I never really got into that, because as I said, I do my mix downs as I write, so it is I find it tough to do mix downs at the end. Something I used to do was to do those stems, and as when I was writing the song with Primo, that's what I would do. I stemmed it out and did those last final edits, like right at the very end. This was like after mixing. This was right before mastering even, and I used to do that. But nowadays, my music doesn't lend itself very much to my music, because I've sort of been making a style that's much more one sound leads into another, which leads into another, which leads into another, and it makes it a bit difficult to do those choppy edits. As much as that may sound nice, it doesn't sound as cohesive as I'm sort of intending. Okay. Of course, some of my other songs that like fit into the IDM genre, I go whole hog totally when it comes to that. Yeah, but nowadays I think my last 5-10% is literally just adding as many sounds as I can until it starts sounding bad, and then removing it. So it's I have the same like philosophy with like EQing. You remove as much as you can until it starts sounding bad, and then you add it back in, and that's it.
It's a
And
good
that's
approach.
yeah, that is essentially it's super not helpful. I know it's very nondescript, but
Fine.
but genuinely, how I get, and those last 5-10% is what takes the longest,
Oh,
because
easily.
sitting on a song for like weeks and being like, God, I have no idea what else belongs in this. Is the most difficult part, at least for me. I don't know if it's the same for you, and I don't know if it's the same for anybody else in chat, but that is definitely the hardest part of producing for me.
Yeah. Also, thank you to Carter for that host of 22 viewers. I appreciate
Oh
it.
shit.
Your overlay is stretched from screen share still.
Is it? Oh god.
Is it? I'm not quite sure what you mean, Glorious Rainbow, but if it is, I apologize. I can't unstretch it, but we'll
Well,
get
shit.
it. It's all good. It's all good. I'll fix it after stream. I'm
I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna use the restroom really quick.
For sure. So while Alex is going, there we go. While Alex is using the restroom and whatnot, let me go ahead and thank a bunch of the follows that we've gotten since the start of this. Thank you to Mendez. Thank you to Prod Anzu, Astrotest, Nonpus3, Epic Gamer Bandoob, what's up Bandoob, and Boxster Dog. Thank you all for those follows. Thank you again for that host, Carter. Hope you had a good stream. This has been really fun. I just noticed we are right over the 3-hour mark. So we've been going for a minute. Hopefully, people are enjoying the interview so far. We're probably going to be wrapping up in a little bit, maybe about another half hour or so. Also, the question about chicken or beef ramen, I think we can save for the end. Nexi has no skill, has no skill. So I would say, hold on to that question for a little bit. I need to remember to cut this out of the actual interview when I upload it to YouTube, which will be up a little bit later than the others, just as a heads up. That I will be, since I'm going to TwitchCon this weekend. Anything that I normally upload, because I try to upload these interviews on Saturday or Sunday, I will not be here, so I cannot do that, but it'll be up probably Monday or Tuesday. Can you play a song on stream right now? You will not regret it. No. Sorry, my guy. Maybe afterwards, but I think for now... Oh, goodness. All right. Well, you've gotten the approval from Silent Science. So once they get their webcam back up, I'll put them on, and then you can drop the link in chat or something, and maybe we can take a listen to it at the end. Does it really have to be right now, Bandoom? Because I'd kind of like to focus more on the interview, and I don't want to do a bunch of cuts to the idea. We're not doing feedback for sure. How long is this? This is 2 minutes. Bandoob, is it cool if we just do it at the end? Because I'd like to finish the interview, because we just got a couple more questions and stuff, but then we can take a listen to it. But I think we've talked about pretty much everything involving songwriting and producing and stuff. So I kind of want to close out this section before we go on to all the little fun questions about DAW Wars and the music industry and viewer questions. I want to talk a little bit about writer's block, because it's something that every artist deals with, and those are things that people deal with in each of those 3 sections that we talked about. Like, a lot of people have trouble opening up a project, seeing a blank DAW, and writing music. There are a lot of people who they're really easy. It's really easy for them to do that part. They can write 8-bar, 16-bar loops all week, all year, but they don't know how to finish that. They don't know how to get it to a finished idea. And then there's people who they have a lot of songs that they know are good, almost done, but they can't seem to get over that final hurdle. So do you want to talk a little bit about, like, you know, your own experience with those three sections of the writer's block process,
Right.
or what you do to overcome those stages?
Yeah. So I think I definitely started out having the writer's block of not knowing where to start, but I think I've transitioned to having the writer's block of not knowing how to continue. So that middle section, that's where I'm at right now, at least. But originally it was that I would keep Ableton open on my laptop, like have it in a separate tab. If I ever got any ideas, I could always go in and just write them down. But I would have ideas so infrequently that it would be really like daunting to have it there. If
Mhm.
that makes any sense, just to like have it in the background, it's like eating up CPU, and I'm like, I'm not using it for anything. But I feel like, what if I have an idea and I really want to grasp it, because it's not often that I have ideas, and then I forget it by the time it's open.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how it used to be. But nowadays, I'm able to just bang out so many ideas. I think maybe because I'm more limited in the sense that uh, now that I'm working, so I'm not working on the best computer right now, which means that if I'm opening Ableton and I work on Ableton, I got to work on Ableton for a while unless I want the entire thing to crash. And so it's like, I feel like because I have that sort of commitment, because I used to work on a desktop,
Yeah.
but that broke, so now I'm on a laptop. Because I need that commitment, and I I keep Ableton closed, I end up having a lot more ideas, just because I'm not so focused on getting those ideas down.
Mhm.
Because now, at least now that I've written so much music, I'm more confident in my ability, and I know that there will always be another idea. I'm not sort of hung up on every single thing that comes up. So if I have an idea, I don't know, when I'm biking home or something,
Yeah.
then if I remember it, great. If I don't, then that's all right. I'll just go do something else for a while. And but now that has transitioned onto not being able to continue with those ideas, which means that I have so many sketches piled up and just nothing to do with them. They're literally just taking up space, and I try to save everything just in case, but I know that some project files I'm never going to look at again,
Mhm.
but just in case. So that is where I'm at currently, and I think right now it really is a luck of the draw if I get really inspired to work on this one thing, because combining one project file with another just made a perfect baby, and I just want to completely see it to the end. Then I'll do that. But right now it just really feels like luck, which I
Okay.
know isn't the case. I know there are things that I can teach myself and that I can learn and do and practice in order to make that easier on myself. But right now it does feel like luck, which is why I find a few songs that I work on a bunch and I just get them really, really down pat, and then just hundreds that I will leave to die. But so that's what I'm at currently.
Oh, for
Oh, and
sure.
I haven't had experience with the 90 to 95% being done yet, but that's going to come someday. I guarantee that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone. I feel like it's from me, like what you're talking about is obviously very relatable, and I think, you know, I'm definitely kind of stuck in that. Like it's hard to get a seed into a developed idea,
Yeah.
something worth finishing. So I don't even really get to the point where I have to think, well, how do I finish this? Because I don't even get past how do
Yeah.
I start. And I also feel like it comes in phases. Like, I remember there was a period of time where I just couldn't start ideas. And then there was a period of time where I couldn't finish ideas. And now I'm kind of back at the place where it's really hard for me to come up with a new idea. And the ideas that I already have don't feel up to snuff.
That's
And
fair.
kind
How
of,
about I just give you all my project files? Then we can go from there.
I mean, we can try it, but I don't know what's going to happen if I
That's
have
true.
50 more plugins that I need to buy or download
No.
in order to get it to work.
Nah.
But no, I mean, it's obviously the collaboration is a big benefit there. And you know, I think also not being too afraid of acknowledging where you're struggling, because it'll give you, at least it's given me, a reassurance that, like, you know, I've gotten past this point before. I know I have, because I finished songs. I finished a song like literally like last month, at the start of August. I finished a song in like 3 days. But having the understanding, like, it's something I've gone through and then fallen back towards, but that just means I will get through it again, is really helpful.
Right, that's fair. And I think that's probably why when I just started out, remixing was so appetizing to me, because it's like you already have this idea. It's really good because, I mean, you wouldn't remix it if it wasn't really good, because you chose it and you enjoy it. Now you just got to turn it into something else. And that was so appealing to me, just because I was having such a tough time finding anything that I was happy starting with. And like, collaboration in that sense brings out the best of the 2 people or 3 people or however many. But I think as much as I enjoy collaboration, there is something about releasing an album you've made entirely by yourself that you can totally call your own that is satisfying to me. But
I get that. I mean, it's like, I think this will be a good kind of topic to end this section on, because originals are super fun, and I think that, like, the more comfortable you get, the more you want to stand behind your own work. Also, thank you to Kagan for that raid. A lot of raids today. Thank you so much for that party of 6 coming in, Kagan. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. How's it going, Jim? Welcome, everyone. But at least for me, and I don't know if other people have experienced this, I can write originals all day. Like, I can come up with my own ideas without even trying. Like, it's just, there's always a new idea coming forth. But I actually struggle the most with remixes. Like, I cannot seem to make remixes. So, like,
wasn't the first song that you released a remix?
Yes, that's the
released.
thing. Well, my first ever real release that got attention was a bootleg. The track that I just put out last month is a remix, and I've done others along the way, but, like, they're actually the most difficult things for me to do. So whenever I talk to someone who feels very comfortable with remixes, like you, I know Sila's big on remixes. I know a couple of other people who they almost prefer doing remixes. Like, I'm always curious, like, how do you do it? Like, how do you get the idea to work? Because I always feel like there's too much stuff from the original that I don't know what I would do to change it.
Right. I think nowadays the approach that I take is that I take a song that I've already written and put the stems over it, which sounds really dumb, but that's an easy way to get started. Like, if you take a project that you're already kind of happy with and it's the same key, you can warp the stems to match, and then you've got a solid basis, because it's like it's a completely new idea with some flavor from the original, and then you can sort of go from there, because then once you've actually started, it's easier to get going with remixes, at least how I've seen it. It's different with everybody.
I'll have to try that, because that sounds like a fun idea. And it also, it's funny because that's like basically your process. Just instead of taking 2 of your songs and putting them on top of each other, you're taking one of your songs,
Exactly.
someone else's.
You know what? I stick with my guns. I stick with what I know.
No, and I think that is totally viable, and that's one of the reasons why I like this interview series, is because you can really start to hone in on what it is each artist like kind of operates like, or the framework that each artist operates under. Like everyone has like their own way of doing things, and it's none of them have ever been wrong. None of them have ever been things that like I disagree with, but like you're very much like you take the ideas and you mash them all together, you get something new. Bill is very much like he goes in and he sees what comes out and he uses that to create the new idea. Like everyone has their own individual process, the special way that their brain processes these patterns. And if other people can find something to borrow or steal from that person, I think that is a success story for both parties, honestly.
Yeah, I think so too. I think your workflow, no, your personality dictates your workflow, like very heavily.
100%, yeah.
And I think hi, I'm Silent Science, by the way. For whoever just DJ Abby K. Also, those gun sounds are my chair. I'm sorry, they make weird sounds. There you go. I need a new chair. Yeah, I think personality dictates your workflow and how you get things done, and it also dictates things like writer's block, what you end up being good at, what you end up needing work on, and it is. I think it's completely based on A, your background, but B, how you feel comfortable expressing yourself through music.
Absolutely. Well, with that, like, are there any like last minute tips or tricks or words of advice, like things you wish that I had asked you or things that you wish we had had some time to talk about?
Where do you think you're going to go next? What's your
Jesus?
Yeah, no,
I'm
sorry.
on
I'm
me.
putting you on the spot.
Oh God.
We need to bring everybody back into a Mussar interview where we all interview you.
That would be intense. I would be down for that, honestly. Just a big group call.
I'm down. We're all grilling you with questions.
Right.
Also, this sweater was like $20 from like a website very much like wish.com. It's just really trashy and crappy clothing. I love it.
Nice. Oh God. See, I don't really know, and I think that might be part of where my writer's block comes in. 'Cause like I have a lot of ideas as far as what I want to do, and I'm very similar to you in that I want to be able to make whatever it is I feel like making, and I have a very broad kind of palette of ideas that I want to draw from. Like I want to make IDM, I want to make heavy bass music, I want to make like chill minimal techno, I want to make fucking obnoxiously long ambient tracks like Brian Eno, or Amon Tobin. I want to, I want to make pop music. I want to make video game music. I want to do movie scores. There's so many different things that I want to do that fit into a more narrow sonic range that like trying to settle on one feels impossible. And so I feel pulled in like 30 different directions.
Right.
But I would say like, lately I have been kind of falling back to my roots a little bit. Because like when I got started, I was obsessed with like reggaeton and moombahton. Like I love that just dembo flow. So lately in like my last remix was like a moombahton remix of a vaguely reggaeton inspired pop tune. So like I've been debating like maybe I should just write just like a full moombahton album. Like just nothing but like 105 to 115, fucking bunch of different styles, but just that boom, the boom, the boom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I guess if there was one direction I would be going in the next like 6 to 8 months, that might be it. But I don't know.
Hell yeah. I'm excited for that.
Well, We'll see. Maybe we can make some neuroton. Moomba Neuro.
Moomatone. Or
Yeah.
reggae neuro. I don't know,
Reggae
something
neuro.
like that.
Something like that. I think that'd be fun. Well, let's pivot into kind of the final process. Oh goodness.
Ignore me, I'm good.
You're all good. Nothing's happening. Don't pay
Nope.
no attention to the person behind the curtain.
Exactly.
So let's just talk about a few fun things.
Sure.
And at this point, if anyone has any questions that we didn't go over that you wanted to ask Silent Science, please drop those in chat now. We'll be answering those as we go. Oh, right. We could start with Nexi has no skills
beef.
question. Yeah. Beef
Wait,
ramen.
It depends. Are we talking ramen or are we talking like overall?
I think the question is in relation to ramen.
Chicken, then. Otherwise,
Okay.
I would say beef because I prefer beef IRL. Like noodles aren't IRL. Like outside of noodles, I prefer. How many times you go pee? Well, I just went like 10 minutes ago.
All right. Well, there you go. What about DAWs? Because you've talked a little bit because you work in Ableton, but your uni is in Logic. By the way,
Yep.
you and I need to have a session where we just talk about alchemy because I think you would have so much fun in alchemy.
Please teach me it.
But but what do you think about kind of the field of DAWs? Like, you can be as DAW warrior as you want. You can be as politically acceptable as you want. All DAWs matter. But like, what are your feelings on the options that are out there?
So before I start, let me ask: do you include things like VCV rack and tractor and things that aren't quite DAWs within this category, or is that something else?
I don't know if I would say like necessarily Tractor or Record Box or Serato. I consider those more DJ software, but VCV Rack definitely. Any trackers for like chiptune stuff, absolutely. The focus is obviously going to be like, the big 3 or 4, Ableton, Logic, FL Studio, Cubase, Reason, Reaper, stuff like that. But yeah, if there's other things that you want to bring up, please, yeah.
Sure. So I've been an Ableton user since the start. Actually, even before I started using Ableton, I started by using the Novation Launchpad app, which is still connected to Ableton. So
okay.
I started by using Ableton before Ableton. I even used Ableton before I even bought it. But so I've been on it since Live 8, and I've gone to Live 9, Live 10, and I'm now on the Live 10 beta.
Yeah.
And I think it's great, really. It may just be a sort of like Stockholm syndrome because that's what I started on. And I could be making the exact same music and be just as proficient even if I had started in Cubase or Reaper or something like that. What are people?
I just sent Proc.
Oh, that's adorable. I can answer Glorious Rainbows' question because that is actually coming up. And I'm a fan of the workflow, but again, it's tough to say if that's Stockholm syndrome or not. The only other besides Logic, which I'm being forced to learn, I'm willingly learning, is a VCV rack, and the only reason why I'm capable of using VCV rack is because I have a modular system, which is actually like over there. You can't see it, but and that's just a natural like digital version, and that's super handy to carry around, of course. But other than that, I actually have installed. Let's see here. I've got Cubase, FL Studio, Reaper, and Bitwig. So those are the 4 others that I have a bit of experience with. I would like to learn. I'd like to learn Bitwig and FL, just because that would be a bit easier to collaborate with other people. I mean, stemming out is useful in some situations, but sometimes I just want to be able to use FL.
Yeah, you just wish you could load up the project.
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't have to ask somebody for the patch of something or whatever. I can just load it up and use it. But I've tried the workflow. It's really isn't for me. It's not for me. I think Reaper and Cubase and Bitwig flow a lot more nicely for me. Of course, Bitwig is essentially Ableton just hyped up and in a different skin.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, but yeah,
I'm not gonna say anything.
yeah, but I think that out of the four that I don't already know, Bitwig would be the easiest for me to learn, then probably Cubase, then Reaper, then FL. Um, I think though, aside from FL, like with the little experience that I've had playing around with Bitwig, Reaper, and Cubase, if you know your DAW well enough, you can translate most things over. It's just getting comfortable with like the hotkeys and things. Like I'm a very hotkey person. I like using shortcuts and I like being efficient in my workflow. But of
Same.
course, so I get like really downtrodden if I'm working with something new where I'm like, I just want to go faster, but I don't know what anything does. So that's sort of what is stopping me from learning another DAW. But of course, having a uni course hanging over your head telling you to learn Logic is a good motivator.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
When you're paying for it, that definitely changes things. Like not like just paying for it
Exactly.
once, but like when you're dealing with like, I paid for 12 fucking weeks of this shit, so
yeah,
I have
exactly.
to.
Yeah, might as well get the most out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I think there were a couple other questions. Nexi has a meme question. What school
Why
are you
is
going to
GarageBand the best,
again? And then I saw Rafter was asking, how has school been? So you could kind of combine those two together.
Well, first off, GarageBand is the best DAW because it has you can literally find every single loop in most pop songs nowadays in the Apple Loops library, including the drum beat to the beginning of Umbrella, who I don't remember who that's by. Is it Beyonce?
Rihanna.
Yeah. Oh,
Rihanna did Umbrella,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. That is an Apple loop, completely untouched, completely unprocessed. And most like loops and things like that in pop songs nowadays, or even from like 2010 and onwards, you can just find in GarageBand. And that's
for
why it's
sure.
the best DAW.
Yeah.
So I'm going to DBS, which stands for, I think, like Deep Blue Sound or something, but they never call it that. They call DBS is stylized, so it looks like dB, like
Yeah,
the
like decibels.
volume, decibels. And so there's a campus in Bristol, there's a campus in Cornwall, there's a campus in Plymouth, and then one in Berlin. So the one I'm going to, Culprit, has done a few master classes here that you can find online. They're all recorded, and DBS has like a YouTube channel where all of this is there. And a few people have done some other master classes, and so this is a really cool place, and it's great so far. It's fucking tough. I'll tell you my story about it.
Okay.
So essentially, I don't know if I haven't been in the U.S. system in very long, but I don't know if they have this thing called UCAS points.
No.
Nope. Okay.
I don't know what that
so
is.
essentially, that's like once you finish high school, you get a specific amount of UCAS points depending on how well you did, and that will let you go to certain universities because they'll have requirements and all of that.
Okay, yeah.
There's no like SATs or anything like that. So in order to get into this, yeah, exactly. There's no SAT or ACT. In order to get into the DBS University, I'm in the pre-degree course right now, and essentially there's two sets of courses you can do. There is the like the 2-year course and the 1-year course. The 1-year course is literally just the 2-year course compressed into one. The 2-year course is what I started in until I realized it was a bunch of like 15-year-olds, and I felt very out of place.
Oh no.
So now I'm in the 1-year course where everybody's like 25 and up. Like there's a 40-year-old woman in my class, and I feel really uncomfortable because I'm like, this is the first time I've had experience in like a university-ish class where everybody's a bunch of different ages, but it's fun. It's interesting.
Totally.
Yeah. So in that course, it will essentially give me the qualifications to go on, and I'll probably go. Hi, is that Bandung? That is. Hi. That will give me the qualifications to go. And so after that, I can essentially go to any university I want. I think this just sounds like a cool university. I'm already living here. I might as well go here anyway. So that is, and within the course we have like 5 different classes. I only have class Monday through Wednesday, which is nice. But like we've got like studio production, like film scoring, working in like live recording. So that's when we sit in the live rooms when we learn how to mix on like proper big desks and things like that. And yeah, I've got a bunch of nice teachers. All of them are producers as well, which is really weird because I can like geek out about like things and they'll be like, I know, and it's great. But
That's
yeah,
dope. Sounds like a fun school. I'm with
yeah,
it.
So
Well, I guess like what about, you know, kind of the music business or the music industry? Like what are your thoughts on it? Like how do you feel about marketing or branding, trying to find a career as an artist, stuff like that?
So there's 2 approaches that I'm essentially taking right now. No, there's 3. There is networking in person, networking online, and then the marketing branding online. Because I haven't done many gigs, so I don't really need to market in person. But so Bristol, that's where I am currently, is notorious for having a drum and bass scene, which is great for me, and like a drum and bass neuro hop scene, which is exactly where I want to be.
Totally.
And so people like from Slugwife, so like people like Kursa and Seppa, and they all live here. They live like 15 minutes away from me.
For sure.
And so I get to hang out with them and chill with them. But then so that's the networking in person, because at DBS, the university that I'm going to, there are, as I said at the start, or maybe I only said this when we were talking before, everybody going there is a producer. So people like Zomboy and people like Zenji went there and they graduated from there, and that's where they got their start. And so Host. Oh yeah, I've heard of Host. And he comes by here, doesn't he? Or is that somebody else? Is that Hostel?
I think that's Hostel. Yeah,
Okay,
Jonah
Hostel.
BK. Yeah.
Yeah. But so that's, yes, Slugwife Fox. So that's like the in-person networking. The online networking I've done a lot on Discord, which I mean is just easy. I'm part of like, well, the max amount of servers you can be part of on Discord is 100. I'm in 100 servers. Not like I use any of them, but it's like you make friends and again, it's the philosophy of what's the worst that can happen if you hit somebody up, not even just to collab, but just to talk. What's the worst that can, they don't respond or they say no, like no harm done. So it's just, currently I'm taking the approach of balls to the wall and trying to just talk to as many people as possible.
Just put yourself out there.
Then outside of that, branding is like really not my strong suit, because I think what I'll do is like if I release a single on my own, if it's like not like a proper label release, which there's nothing wrong with releasing on your own, you can definitely make it just like that. You essentially, what I'll do is like I'll upload it to Bandcamp, upload it to SoundCloud, or like a mini mix or something to SoundCloud, and then promote it on like Twitter and like Facebook, and that's it. I'm not very good at doing the whole like countdown in like 10 days it's coming out.
Click the pre-save link, please.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not good at that, so I'm just like, here, take some new music. If you want to listen, great. Because I'm thankfully, very fortunately, not relying on music currently as my main income. So but I think if I were to be put in that situation, I would obviously have to really up my marketing game. But currently, as it stands, I'm not very good at it.
I guess. I mean, I feel like most artists aren't, and that's kind of for me, that's where the idea of building a team comes into play.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, because I've seen people who have like either built or started to build themselves a team, and I feel like the second you get those ducks in a row, it almost like magically gets easier, but like getting to that point is the hardest part.
Exactly. And I think that is actually a really good approach to take, in the sense that making it nowadays, need a team. Marshmello doesn't do his own artwork and doesn't market his own things and doesn't do his own management, and you really need that team behind you. And because I don't think I've ever met a person who's amazing at all of those, because if they were, they'd be the best producer and the most recognized producer in the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you really need the people who are experts in their field to really back you up.
Oh yeah.
Which I'm not there yet, but
We'll get there. We'll get there. And I mean, even like, even just for other artists, like looking at Drake, for example. Drake is arguably the biggest act out there at the moment, and Drake has a team of songwriters. He has a team of producers.
Yeah.
He has creative directors. He has everything set up to guarantee his success.
Exactly.
And, when you are just getting started, a lot of that stuff you have to carry on your own shoulders. So, like Rafter is saying, having almost like a family unit to build up behind, because that's really where these teams come out of. It's you get people who are all working towards the same vision, and the people who end up either not enjoying or not enjoying being an artist, or weren't an artist to begin with, but were part of that family unit, they become a crucial factor in your success when they're part of like your branding team, or whether they're your manager or your agent or whatever.
Friends turn into your teammates. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's somewhere that people can find a bit of comfort, because as long as you're finding friends, you're finding partners in whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, so I think networking is just a good start, and it'll get you most of that way there. Because if you just build a nice group of people who all know each other, and like Rafter was saying, like a whole group of, like a team working towards one effort, then that's much easier than literally starting from the ground up, as people used to do, where you would go to Battle of the Bands and you would try and find a record label and things like that. It's just absolutely impossible.
Exactly. It's not something I'm looking forwards to, that's for sure. So I guess we can kind of start wrapping things up. We're at about 3.5 hours here. So let's just, if there's any other questions in chat, feel free to just drop those. I guess what we can talk about is like, well, what's coming in the future? Like, because we talked a little bit about what you have planned, the release on Meth Lab, going to school, but like, what is coming down the road? Like, not necessarily your 5-year plan, but maybe like a 2-year plan or like a 3-year plan. What's on the horizon?
So ideally, if I were to go over to, there we go. So ideally, within the next 2 years, I probably want to, so I think the direction I'm going to go with university, which is going to influence my music, is I would rather be a sound engineer than I would a producer, because I'm not good at being marketable, in the sense of I'm not good at presenting myself as a person who you can follow. And I would much rather work behind the scenes in that sense. And so I think as I learn more and more, I'm going to obviously be, I'm going to be getting better and better, and hopefully my music is going to reflect that. But within the next 2 years, I would like to release. So I've thought this out. I think I want to release 2 full-length beat tapes, lo-fi beat tapes, each 45 minutes in length, which ends up about 30 songs per. I want to release, a few singles, just like if songs don't match on albums and they're done, but I want to get them out there. I'll probably just throw them up on SoundCloud for a free download. So that'll just come in between. I want to do that 3-hour ambient no input mixing board thing in two sections. So it's going to be 3 songs each, so each like 30 minutes long. I want to release a an album of collaborations, much like Bill did the collaborative endeavors.
Mm.
Not like releasing a song every week, but just releasing an album of all of the collaborations I've ever done in chronological order, just so
Okay.
you can see how it improves like that, and you can sort of see like that. And then I've got two more things, which is one, as I talked about before, uh, the self-released album of like covers and remixes and things like that, which I have to release self by myself. I can't release it on label or anything. Which exclusive, that's going to be called Undercover because I'm bad at puns. So that's what that is. And then aside from that, I want to release an album, and I have to figure out where I can release this because I have no clue where I could release this. Maybe Bandcamp as a zip file, because I want to release every single unfinished sketch that I've ever saved, as it is currently, like things, and call it like something like Abandoned or something.
Okay.
But that'll end up being, I don't know if Bandcamp can handle like 90 plus songs, so I might just like record myself being like, "Hi, buy this track for like, I don't know, like $5 or something." Um, and you'll get a zip file with all of my unfinished things. These are all god awful, but you may find some gems in there that you enjoy. If you want to turn them into something, it's all yours. So
I
yeah,
like that. That's a. I mean, that's a
that's what's coming
cool.
up.
Yeah. Well, I like that. That's a cool concept. I mean, everything that you have sounds like a really cool concept. So I'm excited to hear all of them because it's like they're all so different from each other.
Right.
Which I think is really exciting. And honestly, the idea of like, let me just get rid of like almost on a spiritual level all of these just sketchbook ideas that are just filling up my hard drive and just kind of set them free, so I don't even have to worry
And then
about them
start
anymore.
fresh. Yeah,
Absolutely,
exactly.
that's really cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me on.
No,
It
this
was
was
great.
This was so
First
much
interview
fun.
I've ever had.
Hopefully, first of many.
Well, we'll
So,
see.
do you want to be on stream while we listen to Bandoom's thing? 'Cause,
Sure, let's do it.
I guess I'm just gonna say, since I have not been doing these, shout out to YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment,
Hi, YouTube.
subscribe. So, yeah, there's Silent Science. I'm gonna be cutting the video here, so there will be a fade out and all that stuff, and then we are going to